What was your closest brush with death?
The Ibrahim Quarries. I'll never forget the name because this is where all the shit went down. They start making their way to the top of the Ibrahim Quarries. He takes off. We start rolling out. And then it turns into like this desert high-speed chase. And as soon as they see these military vehicles, chaos ensues. A couple guys get killed over here. A couple guys get killed over here. The one main guy's like in the middle, and it's myself and this other Marine slowly working our way towards him. KF, get down, get down, get down. And then as we are saying that, you see him kind of go into his pockets, fix something onto his hands, and just boom! They would put 2 grenade pins tied on a fishing line onto their sides of their pockets, and then just raise their hands like, hey, put your hands up. Boom! As soon as we saw him kind of go into his pockets, he just detonated himself, and there was just mass and meat and just stuff flying ever. But on the helo footage, Corporal, he goes, he just walks out of like the shot.
This is Donny Dust, and genuinely, this might be my favorite episode I've ever done of this show. He's known for his 10 million TikTok followers that watch him make ancient Stone Age weapons, but his life is way more interesting than just that. For the next couple hours, he's going to be telling us some of the most insane adventure stories I've ever heard in my life. From interrogating terrorists as a Marine counterintelligence agent to surviving 60 days alone in the wilderness, and he even talks about his near-death experience that changed his life forever. Donny is one of the best guests I've ever had on the show, and genuinely, his stories were so much fun to listen to. So without further ado, sit back, relax, and enjoy Donny Dust. Welcome to camp. Donny Dust.
Sir.
What's up, baby?
I've arrived.
How are you?
Doing well. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much for being here, man. I really appreciate it. There's hasn't been a guest so far that fits so well in the tent than you yourself, Mr. Dust.
This is a great tent. I'm not gonna lie. I'm thoroughly impressed with the arrows and the just the overall essence of what it is. You got some 7.62 hanging from the ceiling, and
you got this whole place cased.
Yeah, I did. I looked. You got oak leaves, tree fort. This is legit.
It's solid, right?
You could survive in here.
You think so?
Absolutely.
How long?
I mean, inside of here, there's enough weaponry already between the guitar. We could definitely make some snares. We got arrows, craft a bow, all this metal. I mean, we could take this whole building over in probably about 30 minutes.
Oh, hell yeah.
So I feel good about it.
That's awesome, especially because it's also air conditioned and there's a bodega next street.
Absolutely.
Across the street. So.
I already grabbed a sandwich earlier.
Okay. Yeah, that makes it pretty easy to survive.
Yeah, I was like, this isn't bad. I can do this.
When there's a Yemeni guy selling you bagels, it's like you already got everything covered. So we're in good hands. Yeah, man. I'll commemorate the pod with a song from my ancestors.
Let's do it.
It's pretty sick, right?
That was awesome. That was good. I should have brought my didgeridoo.
Oh, do you have one?
I do. I play it, and all the dogs howl in the neighborhood, and it's quite the experience. But you can bring it into like some canyons and stuff like that, and it kind of bounces off the walls and play a little flute. It's a good time.
Oh, this is awesome. I'm really excited to talk to you, dude. I found you on TikTok, as did a lot of people, evidently 10 million other people. Primarily, I think what you're known for through TikTok is obviously like forging and creating weaponry and tools and stuff like that. But that's only, just a piece of it. Obviously, you're a survivalist that's gone out in the woods for periods of time solo, surviving on your own, hanging with tribes all over the world. Fascinating stuff, and I'm sure you have stories for days. So I'm really, really excited to get through some of them today.
I appreciate it.
I'm curious, just as a place to start, can you take me through some of the scariest, most intimidating experiences you've had while trying to survive solo in the wilderness?
Yeah, I think probably one that kind of stands out as far as a real kind of scary experience and kind of unique experience is something recently I kind of went through when I was in Africa living with the Maasai. And the Maasai are a pastoralist society. So they raise livestock in the form of cows, sheep, and goats. And that is their currency. That is their everything. So when you go into a Maasai village, you might see chickens running around, but the chickens are there to eat the fleas and bugs and ticks off of the sheep, goats, and cattle. That is how they kind of establish their wasta, or how they establish kind of their wealth in a society. How many wives they have, how much livestock they have.
Oh, really? They're all like polygamist, I guess, or they have multiple wives?
Yeah, multiple wives. And it's kind of a unique thing. If they have more than one wife, then they must provide her with her own dwelling, if you will. But the woman has to build it. The man brings in the one central main beam, kind of a phallus, like the supporting beam, this huge log of girth.
Oh, really?
Wood. Yeah.
Is that like, it's like symbolic of that? Or is that just
Pretty
kind
much
of what Donnie Dust put together?
No, I kind of say it is, but that's absolutely, you know, through a translator, I was kind of understanding why the women build the hut, if you will. And it's like, well, they build it, but the man brings in
The final, like the keystone, so to speak.
Keystone, yeah. It's this huge erect beam right in the middle, and it just kind of holds everything up and kind of holds everything together. And it's, I mean, you find that in a lot of cultures in various primitive shelters. A lot of the shelters face east to catch the morning sun, and it's to represent the womb. Every shelter represents a woman's womb. It's the safest, it's the warmest place. It's the place you want to be when you're resting and when you're growing and when you're healing. And each day you leave that shelter as if you're exiting the womb into, you know, the morning sun. So there's a lot of symbolism built into these actual shelters and structures and different things.
Is that just within the Maasai, or do you find that across a lot of cultures?
A lot of cultures, a lot of American Southwest cultures. When they build kivas or hogans or any sort of earth lodge, a lot of them, not a lot of them, most of them face east. And it really symbolizes that womb of the female. And, you know, we all don't remember our birth, but we can remember other times inside of a warm, inviting sort of place, I guess you could say. And that's kind of what it symbolizes, that safety, if you will. So when I was with the Maasai, it wasn't a tourist sort of visit to a village. How I got into this village was I essentially had to create a value on my part and kind of show them that I don't want to be here just to like snap photos and film something and do this. I actually want to be a member of this village. So, you know, I showed up in a shuka, which is a traditional red clothing that the Maasai wear. And the Maasai are a relatively new culture, if you will, a new people. They kind of moved from the western portions of Africa about 700 years ago and settled in Tanzania and Kenya and kind of that general region just north of the Olduvai Gorge, which is one of the locations where some of the oldest stone tools have ever been found by Mary Leakey, and not too far from Lake Turkana, which is in the northern portions of Africa.
Interesting.
But they are a culture that has kind of migrated, and their shukas traditionally were animal hides. And then through trading with Indian traders, it turned into a fabric, kind of like a woven fabric. And then when the Scottish came around, they had their tartans. And their tartans are the plaid that they would typically wear. And the Maasai liked the color. One reason, because they used to take ochre, which is a natural earth pigment, and dye the white cloth that they would trade with the Indians, because they had, over a period of time, gotten the lions and certain predatory animals accustomed to the red, knowing that if something is wearing red, it's likely to fight back, compared to a zebra who's going to run away. So the animals started to not like adapt, but they became very familiar with those that wear red typically will throw a spear, throw a rungu, carry some sort of oleum, which is like a large machete-like knife, and they will fight back. They will protect their livestock.
Wow.
So I went into the village wearing a shuka, very, very little Maasai natural, like just pleases and thank yous. But most of the young kids, they speak English, and they're always wanting to practice their numbers. So they'll be like 1, 2, and you got to go like 1 through 100. You're like, great. And then you go to the next kid, 1 through 100.
Go all the way through.
But it's a very unique thing. But this is a village that is not isolated. They are familiar with, you know, Mazungos, which is white people, so to speak. Mazungos. So
That's nice. I like
I was known as a Mazungo. And I'd be like, hey, I'm a Mazungo. They giggle and laugh. But it was, they knew them just through observation. There wasn't a lot of interactions. Maybe when they went into the market to buy like ogali, this kind of ground meal, they might come across a handful in there. But it's not like you're paying money to go into this village. So I showed up with 4 female goats and 2 male goats as a way to kind of pay the chief, whose name was Lapore. I'd like to stay in the village. I'd like to literally be a part of this village, you know, tending to the cattle, tending to the sheep, standing guard if need be, whatever I need to do. I just want to live like you. And the exchange is I give you some goats and you get some great manual labor, and you just let me be.
Where do you get goats from?
You just go to the local market and haggle a couple goats, and you show up with, you know, a trail of goats, and then you make your way into the village. You kind of, and I had an interpreter, this gentleman, Steven, who I was kind of working with, who was kicking some of the natural language, and kind of got me in there and kind of explained what I wanted to do. And they set me up in my own little hooch, and
like they accepted the offer.
They accepted the offer.
How did you feel walking in there with your goats? Were you like, oh, this is going to be great, or were you kind of nervous?
I was definitely nervous because, you know, rejection, you don't want to get rejected. But a couple of the things that I was able to do already, as far as doing like a hand drill friction fire, and how I kind of briefed Steven was like, there's a term called Dorobo, which is a bushman. And he was referencing me as a Dorobo, meaning like this isn't your average human being. This isn't your average guy. He is very much like you, but he is a Mzungo, a white guy. He can do a hand drill friction fire. He can throw a spear. He can do a lot of things that are of value, more importantly, carrying large quantities of firewood, standing, you know, watch at night. And then I came with the sheep, and then I came with a couple other items like pencils, notepads, flashlights, because I didn't have any. I brought a first aid kit, a small first aid kit. And my interpreter, Steven, was like, there's no need to have that. They're not going to know what to do with it. It's not going to really benefit. So we'll get rid of that.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Just something I thought for sure they would be like, oh, yes, first aid, that sort of thing.
Nice.
Band-Aids, Neosporin, that sort of thing. No interest. And then brought him a goat hide that I had tanned myself, because I had heard a rumor that when they kill their goats, they actually don't tan their hides. They just get rid of the skin. They'll lay it out, they'll stretch it, they'll turn it into various things, but they don't really tan it, which is a process where you take the brains and introduce it into the raw hide, the flesh form of the skin, and then it turns into a buck skin after you smoke it, which is a lot of, you know, indigenous cultures, Native American populations wore animal skins, if you will.
Interesting. So
I thought the goats would present a great value, and yeah, I mean, they accepted me, and before you know it, you know, at first the little kids were definitely afraid because I've got long hair, so I got called Simba. You'd be called Simba as well.
Oh,
long hair. I mean, you're like, cool. It's like lion.
It's a great compliment.
Yeah, I'm like, I can dig that, you know.
See, because if people say I look like a lion, they normally mean like the one from Wizard of Oz, which is not. I don't want to be that lion.
Still a lion. Still a lion. But it was. So the kids were kind of like, you know, a little apprehensive at first because I'm heavily tattooed and I'm standing out there in like a tank top and shorts and sandals.
And how many people are in this village?
So I think there was probably close to about 15 there. But as soon as a Mzungo kind of comes around, this strange Mzungo white guy who's got goats, who can make fire and throw a spear, some of the other folks from different villages started walking over, and they were curious to see what was going on. Before you know it, there's like 40, 50 people in there. You're trying to figure out who's who in the zoo. But eventually, over a period of time, well, not a period of time really, but just through conversation through the interpreter and with the chief, he was like, we'd love to have you. You can stay here for as long as you want, and we'll definitely put you to work. Now, when I hear the term put you to work, I'm like, cool, that's fine. You know, I had 2 sisters. I was the youngest. I'm going to be put to work. My parents always worked me pretty hard, hauling logs and doing stuff like that. But it was a different kind of work because in that society, the man is kind of has certain roles, and then the female also has, you know, her specific role. So in the morning, you'd wake up, the men would all kind of congregate, let some of the livestock out, and the young boys would leave the boma. And the boma is a circular shelter. It's a circular wall made of acacia, and acacia has some really, really long thorns. So there's an external boma, so a big circle, and then there's an internal boma. And on the internal boma is where they keep all of their, you know, their cattle, their sheep, their goats. So in the mornings, they let everything kind of out to graze in the African savanna. And then like the 6, 7, 8-year-old boys grab a spear, grab a rungu, which is a throwing club, and then go out and tend to all of the livestock. So there's like leopards and lions and hyenas, warthogs, huge elephants, giraffes, stuff everywhere. And these little kids, I mean,
they are the shepherds.
They are the shepherds.
Little 8-year-old kids
out there
with a spear and like a throwing club. And they're just running around taking care of all the animals.
Just taking care of the animals. Like it's absolutely nothing.
Wow.
And like I'm watching this and I'm like, man, it was just unbelievable. Because you around New York or anywhere around the U.S., you don't see many 8-year-old kids out on their own tending livestock with a spear and a rungu.
Yeah.
So immediately impressed with that. And while that was going on, the men kind of congregate, and we have like, morning tea, if you will, which is all fresh goat milk. Because the Maasai only eat goat meat, drink blood, drink milk, and eat ogale. Those are the only things you're going to really consume. Again, there's chickens. And I'm like, so are we doing eggs for breakfast? What's the deal? And no, they don't do anything with the chickens.
Why don't they eat eggs?
They just don't. It's not part of their lifestyle. It's not part of what they've traditionally done for hundreds and hundreds of years.
And do they have like, cows or like, other like large cattle like that?
Yeah, they have large, it's like an African styled cow where it's kind of short haired, big horns.
But they don't eat that.
They'll eat cow every once in a while, but that is their biggest currency. So a lot of the consumption is through the goats and then the sheep. And the milk is really, when you think about like people who have raised animals and they process the milk and they consume the milk, make a variety of things, it just kind of like dawned on me right there, like there's no need to refrigerate milk. As long as you only milk what you need for your morning cup of tea, your afternoon cup of tea, it stays pretty fresh.
It's coming right from the tap.
It's coming right from the tap. And I'm trying to milk goats, and there's like 8 or 9 women all laughing at me, but they wanted me to try milking the goats. The kids are laughing. The men are kind of laughing. Everyone's laughing at me as I'm like grabbing these giant nipples, just trying to get some milk out. And then they're showing me these techniques, and I get a couple squirts, and I'm like, I'll just give me this spear. I'll stand and defend against the lions, But so as this was, going on, there was, night shifts, if you will. I'd kind of exit my little hooch. I'd be wearing my shuka, which is just this cloth, and I got a rungu and a spear, and you hear like lions huffing in the distance, hyenas, and I was like, so if something jumps this boma, like it was this weird kind of like immersion, because I was instantly willing to lay my life on the line for like this tribe. Like if something goes down, I'm 100% like, I'm in. Like, this is my new clan. This is my new tribe. Just like in the Marine Corps, like, this is my platoon. We will do everything and anything to defend the people of this village as well as the livestock, because this is their livelihood.
So interesting how that happens, right? Like
just like that.
You'd never met these people before.
Zero.
You knew quite little about like the culture. Obviously, you were familiar. And then within, 48 hours?
Yeah.
I'll do anything for these people.
Pretty much.
I really think it taps into like something primal in our brains to say, look, these people let me in. They have accepted me into the group. I'm going to do anything to stay within the group.
Absolutely.
And it's just automatic.
Yeah, it was a real quick immersion. And I think that like automatic response is definitely ingrained in us somehow. Because even my times out in the bush, you go to this like, I call it like a ground truth. And everyone seeks ground truth in everything. As a comedian, as a podcaster, you have a ground truth. You have an expertise. You have the knowledge, skills, and abilities and experiences that can give you a level of authenticity, more important, like technical proficiency in this. Mm-hmm. And for me, like in the woods, I have a ground truth there. And part of that ground truth that I experience is that like willing to go to great lengths if somebody's with me to make sure that they're fed. Living with the Maasai, knowing that, if their animals are taken, that impacts them. I eventually get to leave, but that could impact them in the long term. There's a quick you become very just 100% primal, and you are there. Like whatever it is that needs to get done. And like, keep in mind, there's still warring factions going on. Like one of the guys was telling me, but 3 weeks earlier, there was a skirmish between 2 tribes and cattle, and they were throwing spears and throwing rungus and getting into it just across on the Tanzanian border. So that sort of warfare, like a pastoralist sort of warfare over livestock, is still going on. It happens in, not super frequently, but it does happen when a number of goats start to move this way. There's 2 kind of opposing Maasai tribes. They'll try and snatch them up. Try and take them.
Because those borders, I guess, are kind of like loosely defined.
Yeah, there's no border.
Yeah, but like, your sheep was over on our side. And
it's ours.
And now it's ours now.
Yeah.
And no, that was ours, and it wasn't yours in the first place, and your shepherd lost it. So not only are you now standing there holding your spear as the sun is setting, around the livestock that are now entrusted to you against predators, coyotes, hyenas, whatever. Not coyotes, probably just hyenas. Yeah.
Jackals.
Yeah, jackals. And not only are you worried about the wild predators, you're also worried about other tribes maybe coming in, stealing cattle, stealing livestock.
Yeah. Anything was possible at that point. That very first night, and like, you know, it's the moon is up and I can hear things and there's no lights. So I brought a handful of flashlights in which they were pumped about, but I'm like scanning, turning it off and on and like seeing green eyes moving on the hillside.
Wow.
And just like, out of nowhere, I was like, we got to do this. We got to do this. Like, you know, we all have that, like, oh, I could fight a bear, I could fight a mountain lion. We would all probably get killed instantly, but at least I would go down with like a gnarly ass spear in my hand. I'm like, let's do this. It's not what my mother and father wanted to hear, but I was willing to, you know, I didn't want to be the guy that goes into this village and then all of a sudden things start kind of going awry.
Yeah, of course.
Livestock's getting killed.
This is sketchy. This is also out of your arena. Like you're like, yeah, put me in the woods, I'm fine. Put me in, you know, Vermont, I can handle it.
Yeah.
But now you're in a completely different terrain with completely different animals.
Yeah. And that's 100% the truth. I mean, there's a familiarity with it, but like when I'm out in the Colorado mountains, aside from moose and the mountain lions that really don't want anything to do with you, and black bear, now, you know, wolves have been reintroduced, your confrontation with those is relatively minimal. I mean, I've had some running with moose, but nothing to the point where it's like potential warring clans, multiple packs of lions and hyenas. Like, it's not even a factor. You might see a moose in the distance and be like, I'll just go this way.
Did they give you any advice before you went out there? Like, did they tell you anything, or did they just say, hey, don't fuck up?
Yeah, it was kind of like, you know, don't fuck up, but more importantly, like, don't do anything crazy in the sense of like, you know, we don't want you to get hurt because this could wind up, you know, coming bad on us. I'm like, don't worry about it. There was no waivers to sign. You just showed up with some goats, a shuka and a smile, and a couple pens and pencils and flashlights, and they're like, welcome to the family. And I was like,
don't do anything crazy. Yeah. Famous last words.
Exactly.
Okay, so what happens next?
So that first night, I kind of had this weird kind of experience, this weird pucker factor. So I'm walking around the inside of the boma. You're hearing the goats, you're hearing the sheep, and I'm hitting my flashlight, and all of a sudden I see this set of green eyes, and I'm like, oh shit, what is this? And it's dark, so all you can see are the green eyes, and I'm trying to do like this whole spatial awareness as far as what's the distance between the eyes, how, you know, lower to the ground. But most animals that stalk, they get down low and they slowly move in. This thing was kind of moving quick, and I was like, all right, it seems a little big for like a hyena or a lion. What is it? So then, like an idiot, it starts to move around one side of the boma, and I'm like, I should probably investigate this. This seems like the most logical thing to do. I should probably go see what this animal is. So then, you know, there's no black, you know, marks in my checkbook as far as living with the Maasai. So I start following this animal, and as I'm kind of coming around the boma, I hear the chickens like flutter. You know, you hear like them flying up, and yeah, they kind of take off. And I'm like, shit, not on my watch, man. I'm going back to like Marine Corps days, like staying like not on my watch. And as I come around this corner, I see these green eyes slowly turn its head towards me. And then I actually am able to hit it with the light and catch enough of its silhouette to only find out it's like this small little jackal. So I'm like stalking this animal, like I'm about to get into it. And it's a jackal no bigger than like a cat. I'm like, you gotta be friggin' kidding me. So not the most exciting thing, but the best part about the whole experience was after living with the Maasai for, you know, a couple of days and tending to the sheep and cattle, they honored me in what's something, it's called a meat camp, and it's just for the men. And the women are involved, but they're involved in a different capacity. So Lapore.
Is it called a meat camp?
It's called a meat camp.
It's like a sausage fest?
You would think. Maybe we should incorporate one here. This is like with the camp, we could do a meat camp.
That'd be sick.
But so we let the goats out. We go grab the goats, and Lapore's like, "Look, we want to honor you. Thank you for being part of the tribe. You know, before you leave." And so we go snatch up 2 goats, so 2 male goats that I brought because he didn't want them necessarily breeding with the other females. And I'm like, "No, I get it." So we go snag these goats up, throw them up on our shoulders, and we just start walking into the woods right along the tree line. And what I was told is basically, which sounds like a great time, is that we're going to go into the woods, we're going to slaughter these goats, and then we're just going to sit and eat goat meat all day. And I'm like, this sounds good. And as we're going through this process, I, eventually walk over to where we're going to do it. And they wanted me to kill one of the goats. So have you ever killed a goat before?
No, I have not yet.
So when most people think about slaughtering an animal, it's quickly slicing the throat, or they shoot an arrow through it or put a bullet through it. And that's kind of how they harvest it. Well, in the Maasai culture, the blood is the most important thing for them to consume. So how you actually kill this goat is you suffocate it. You grab it by its back legs with one hand, two of its back legs. You put your knee on its throat, and then you take your other hand and you put it around its mouth, and you just start squeezing its mouth shut and driving your knee into its throat until it is void of every last bit of breath. It is the most brutal way I have ever taken an animal's life.
But that's how they culturally do it.
That's how they culturally do it. So for me to be a Mzungo in that case, you know, you have to do it. This is like, most people, when they slaughter a goat, they slice its neck, the blood runs on the ground. But that is such a sacred and important thing to them. It gives them nourishment. It gives them all the vitamins that they need. It is part of what the Maasai do. You know, even on their cattle, when they're not butchering a cattle, they'll still pierce the neck on the carotid artery of the actual cattle, drain the blood out, and just drink the blood. So
like before they, like while it's alive?
While it's alive. They won't even kill it. They'll just drain some of the blood out and then just drink it. And then the wound will close up. Just a small little puncture. They kind of get the cow moving, get its heart rate kind of pumping. They'll quick little puncture right to the carotid artery. Blood will start pouring out. They'll pass it around and drink it and let it close itself up.
That's gnarly.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. So Lepore, he takes his goat. He's like, now you have to do yours. And this is like the most brutal, savage, upfront thing I have ever done when killing this goat, was putting my knee on its throat, holding its back legs, and then literally crushing its snout and mouth in my left hand, just squeezing as much as I could until there was no life. And then, you know, it's a very graphic thing, and I can tell you it is not a quick process by any means. It is very, it's up close and personal. There's lots of spitting and snarling and cries for help. So if people really want to know where their food really, really comes from, like, that is how one culture, one people of this world, you know, idolize that food source and then try to savor every bit of it. Because once it's done, the goat is pulled onto a giant bed of leaves, and a small incision is made down the side of its neck where you're just removing the skin. And when they pull the skin out, it almost makes a little bowl. And then they puncture the carotid artery. You push on the ribs, and all the blood squirts out into that little bowl. And then it just fills up full of blood. And then everyone just takes turns going down, sopping up as much blood as you can. Especially the one that killed the goat, i.e. myself and Lepore. You have to drink a large quantity of the blood, and then you start the butchering process, which is taking.
You have to drink. You get to drink. Like,
you have to. It's like anybody can drink, but like whoever takes it and actually kills the animal through the suffocation process, it's like the honor to have the first, you know, couple mouthfuls of blood.
But for them, it's a privilege. Like they see it as an honor.
An honor, absolutely.
Oh, wow. For you were like, all right, I'll drink.
I'll totally do this.
Yeah.
I mean. That wasn't my first time drinking animal blood, but it was one of those ones where I was like, all right, this is that full, you know, cultural experience. Let's get into it. Let's continue getting into it.
Yeah. But was that experience like, because obviously you, like most people I imagine, probably love animals. Like I can't imagine you're like being you know, an adventurer, you know, an outdoorsman.
Yeah.
I'm sure you love animals. I have no question about that. But with that being said, this type of, you know, the killing of an animal is like pretty brutal, right? Like,
without a doubt.
Was there any party that was like conflicted? Where you're like, it is the culture, I get it, but also like, damn, this is kind of tough.
Yeah, I think there's a small switch that kind of turns off. Like, I think the hardest thing for me once I snatched up the goat and threw him on my shoulders was the goat's making his noises. He's like licking my ear. So there's almost like that personal connection right there. But there's a little switch that kind of like turns off and says, now you are food. You know, I appreciate you. I respect you. I'm going to do right by you. More importantly, I respect these people and the relationship they have with their animals. And now it's time for us to, you know, feed off your flesh and consume you so they can keep going. And it's giving praise. There wasn't, when they, would suffocate an animal and they would drink its blood and consume its flesh, it wasn't anything out of disrespect. They understood, and I understood the importance of those animals after spending nights standing guard, watching those, making sure they were tended to. There is that animal husbandry relationship there, and it is a very important thing to them. And they also realize that part of their value of those goats and sheep and cattle is it's a source of food. It's a source of meat that they don't get to eat every single day. Imagine eating like oatmeal every single day with goat's milk and some chai tea. That's kind of the majority of the things that they consume on a regular basis. But like when the opportunity comes around to eat flesh, to eat goat, it wasn't wasted. When I mean we consumed everything in the goat, everything was consumed except the hooves.
Wow.
I mean, intestines, stomach, gallbladder, kidneys,
bone marrows,
everything. And the whole meat camp is a full day. So once you actually break down the goat, you start taking it apart. The women are off to the side and the men are up at the meat camp. Well, the two cuts of meat that actually go to the women are the back straps of the actual goat, which is kind of the best cut of meat on an animal, most like elk, deer, bison, things like that. So it's a long strip of meat that's got no bones. It's just real tender. It's choice. So the two back straps of the two goats actually go to the women, and then the hind legs go to the kids. So those are pretty much the better cuts of meat actually goes to the other folks in the village. And then the men consume all the remnants of everything that's left behind. And that is, drinking that first, amount of blood. And then in the butchering process, blood kind of collects. So they drain the blood into some sort of container, and then they start to stir it with a stick. And what they're doing is essentially mixing it so all of the coagulated blood will stick to the stick, and then they're left with, I guess, not so much plasma. It's more of like the liquid form of it, and that goes into a soup later on, or it's poured over all of the fat that comes off the goat. They would take the intestines, the stomach lining, pretty much everything and anything, and then kind of make a crackling out of it and then pour blood over the top. Bones are broken open, all the marrow is extracted, that's incorporated in soup, and everything is over an open fire. There's no salt, there's no pepper, there's none of it. It's just right over the flames.
Wow.
It's delicious.
There is a respect and an honor that goes into like the ritual of it. Like, I don't know, there's probably people listening that are like, oh, that's so brutal. But it's like, you eat chicken that's kept in a dark warehouse for, 2 weeks of its life. It can't walk because it's so full of hormones. And then it just gets its head cut off. And then we're like, yeah, well, this is the humane way. Yeah. I'm like, I think what you did and what the Maasai people do is probably more respectful and honors the life of that animal more than something that's just stuck in a dark room for,
Absolutely.
its whole life. Being able to take this thing, nourish it, raise it, have a relationship, and then say, okay, your time has come to give life to the rest of the tribe. Yeah. And we're going to use every part of it and be respectful of your life. Yeah. Like, I got no problem with that.
Yeah, I mean,
it's pretty cool.
We should be doing that when you think about it. You know what I mean? Like, a lot of the meats that we eat, there is no relationship to it. It's just you can go to the store, purchase it. And like from the things that I hunt, from the things that I've eaten all around the world, there's a food drive or a hunger drive. When you're hungry, you have to go out and get these things. So like my two boys, they don't eat food that comes in plastic, whether it's bison meat that I've killed, elk, mule deer, roadkill. We're a big roadkill family. I mean, especially in Colorado. Deer gets hit on the side of the road, takes a headshot, snaps its neck. It just lays on the side of the road and freezes. I mean, that's 150, 180 pounds of fresh meat and heart and kidneys. I mean, you can eat all that. More importantly, you get the hide off of it. You can render the fat. I get the bones to make all sorts of weird knives and shit out of. The sinew out of the animal. I mean, wow. It's free food. My kids have grown up. My two boys, William and Alden, 17 and 15. Those kids have eaten more wild game than you could possibly manage. In my house, it's not, hey, what are we eating? Oh, we're eating bison tonight. It's just meat. It's like meat and this, meat and potatoes, meat and rice. And I put stuff in crock pots, and they'll kind of go in there and be like, what is that? And I'm like, it's just meat. And they're like, cool. And they just eat it. Wow. Heart, tongue.
Now, what's your time frame to make sure something hasn't like gone bad?
I mean, if it's warm summertime, springtime, I'll walk over to it, give it a smell test. But, I usually pull something off of it. So if it's like a complete destruction of the animal, like, and there's just chunks.
It's obliterated.
Yeah, there's nothing there. But if it's a headshot or it's been hit in the side and it looks like nothing's ruptured, I don't see any bloating, well, throw it in the back of the truck. There's been many days when they were in elementary school, I'd pick them up from school and be like, don't look in the back. And they're like, what's in the back? And I'm like, it's roadkill. And they're like, oh my God, again? I'm like, yeah. So then we go home and, those boys from a very young age had stone flakes in their hands, slicing open deer legs, pulling out the sinew.
It is interesting because I bet you, I don't know, my initial reaction is like, you eat roadkill? Like, that's so gross. That's a dead animal.
Yeah.
But then I was like, wait a second. They're all dead animals.
All dead animals.
That's so funny. That's how disconnected we are from food in America.
Yeah.
That the idea of you seeing a dead animal on the side of the road that got, clipped by a car and broke its neck an hour ago, to me is so gross. But it's the same dead animal as, what's at a grocery store that I go pick up.
Yeah.
And at least, in your case, it's like you're taking something that, lost its life. And granted, there's no shortage of deer, as we know.
Oh, yeah.
But, it's sad that a deer got killed by a car, of course.
Absolutely.
But now, instead of it being like this gross, carcass on the side of the road that decomposes over the course of weeks and then vultures come by and then you're able to go clean it up, use all parts of it, and save money and feed your family.
Yeah, that's it. And mine's fresher when you really think about
That's
it.
a good point. It's not full of hormones. It's not full of all this stuff.
Yeah.
Wow.
100% real organic, fresh meat.
That's interesting. What's up, guys? We're going to take a break really quick because I need to tell you about one of my favorite new products in 2024. It's called Zippex. Yes, Zippex is a nicotine-infused toothpick. Now, if you know me, you know I like to indulge in a little bit of nicotine from time to time, okay? That's true. I don't like to smoke it. I don't like to vape it. Obviously, those things are very bad for your lungs. They're bad for your health. They make you feel bad when you work out. Not good. But nicotine on its own has been proven in scientific trials to actually improve neural communication, improve cognitive function, improve sharpness, improve mental clarity. Look it up. It's very, very interesting research. Anyway, back to Zippex. This is a nicotine-infused toothpick, okay? This is probably my new favorite way to get my little kick of nicotine. It's absolutely amazing. And it's great because you can use it anywhere at any time. It's very, very discreet. You just pop it in and immediately you're getting whatever flavor you've purchased. This one right here, peppermint watermelon. Tastes amazing. They have 6 different flavors. They're all fabulous and they all do the trick. Zippex is great for a couple reasons. If you're like me and you don't like to smoke or vape, Zippex is probably my favorite way to deliver that nicotine fix right to your body. It feels absolutely amazing. It looks cool. And also on top of that, I sometimes get food caught right in this little tooth right here. I always carry flossers with me. I always carry toothpicks with me, but now I have 2 in 1. Boom. After dinner, I'm getting a little fix and I'm getting food out of my teeth. That's a win-win right there. 2, it looks cool. It's discreet. While you're driving, you pop a Zippex in. You're feeling good. You're cleaning out your teeth. What do you want more than that? Secondly, if you're someone that maybe does smoke, maybe you do use vapes, maybe you do use cigarettes, you're going on a long flight. You're going to be stuck somewhere. You're going to be at a funeral. You're going to be at a wedding. You're going to be a baby shower for your baby. And you can't be ripping cigs at your own baby's baby shower. That looks insane. So what are you going to do? Pop a Zippex in. Now you're getting your nicotine fix and you're feeling good. Now, what if you're someone that doesn't even like nicotine? Zippex has something for you as well. They have B12 and caffeine-infused toothpicks if you're not a nicotine user or you're trying to get away from your nicotine habit. That's totally fine. Zippex has helped tens of thousands of customers in leading a way to a healthier lifestyle that, maybe they currently vape or use cigarettes, and they can probably help you too. Make your lungs happy and try Zippex nicotine toothpicks. Ditch the cigarettes, ditch the vape, get a nicotine-infused toothpicks, okay? Here's what I want you to do. I want you to go to zippextoothpicks.com today. Get 10% off your first order by using the code Gagnon, Gagnon, at checkout. Your lungs will be glad that you did. You must be 21 years old to order, and I just want to say this as a warning, nicotine is an addictive chemical. Zip more, smoke less with Zippex nicotine toothpicks. Now let's get back to the show.
Yeah, when I got my dog Finn was he was found on the side of the road eating roadkill. And Finn is...
So you guys have a lot in common?
We had an instant bond. I'm like, you like roadkill? So do I. Let's be buds. So yeah, I adopted him. He's a pit bull husky. He's known as a Pitsky. And then there's one of the vets said he might have coyote in him as well. So I think he's an old res dog, an old reservation dog from down south. Somebody adopted him when he was a puppy and then eventually he escaped. And he's a bruiser. He looks like a coyote as far as his coloring and stuff. So I got to be careful with him out in the woods because I mean, I could do a TikTok or a video and someone's like, there's a wolf behind you. I'm like, that's a dog. No judgment. But anyway, I got Finn, and he was kind of like my only companion when I would go out in the woods. And this is, a couple of years ago. So when I picked him up, kind of went through this process of kind of like bonding with him. I'm like, all right, guy, you and I, we need to go out in the bush. We're going to head up to like 12, 13,000 feet. We're going to hunt marmot. We're going to hunt ptarmigan, and we're going to live. And we're just going to see how we bond, if you will. So throw him in my truck. We head up deep into the mountains, and we spend several days, shooting marmot with bows. He's flushing, ptarmigan, not really flushing them. He's just sniffing around, and ptarmigan flies, and I can see it. And then I shoot. And ptarmigan is like it's an upland game bird. It's real good meat. And so we're up there,
what kind of bow hunting are you doing? Is this
primitive bow? Just a
really?
stick. No compounds. Some folks call them training wheels. No, none of that stuff. Just a regular stick bow, primitive bow made out of osage or hackberry or white ash, sinew cordage, all natural arrows. Like in my workshop, I have nothing but goose wings hanging from the ceiling because that's where I pull out and get all my fletchings. Various types of shafts for the arrows.
Wow, so this is all with the bow that you made.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And it's so cool. It's good. I prefer to hunt in that capacity. It's another story I can go into, but so we're out there and we're eating good. Like it's a great bond. We're swimming in these in the upper elevations, you'll find these depressions in the ground. And once the snow melts, they'll kind of stay up there. And they get really, really warm just from the sun. They're only like 1.5 feet deep, but you can kind of lay in them. They're nice and warm. I'm in a loincloth. It's just him. I've got a patu, which is like this. It's kind of like a shuka, but it's just a big cloth. You just kind of wrap yourself up in it. We're sleeping on the stars. There's no fire. He's just laying next to me. Like we just instantly bond. And, you're hand fishing, which is, you find a stream and the fish are swimming in it. You just walk over and just snatch them out. And then, you throw him a fish and he gnaws on a fish and then you eat a fish. So it's like bro time, like the ultimate bro time. So him and I are getting along really, really well. And this kind of goes into like the threats in the mountains. But as we're walking out, we're both fat and happy. We're sunburned. His nose is sunburned. And we're walking down, and keep in mind, I've only had him for a couple days, and I think we did like 4 or 5 days in the mountains. We're walking down on this kind of like rocky escarpment, kind of level down in this little draw area, and he's probably like 10 feet in front of me, kind of just looking back, wagging his tail, and this big moose jumps, boom, right in front of me. And like moose is the biggest hazard, more than mountain lions, more than black bears, anything like that. Because a moose will charge, especially if it's the rut, it's the mating season, and the moose is, horny as anything. Anything gets in his way is a threat. A female moose with a young calf is an even bigger threat because she's going to protect her
these
calf.
Things can move.
They can move.
I don't I've seen those videos where it's like, it just gets to full speed sprinting through the snow.
Yeah, they're monstrous. And they can run through water. They are just the ultimate like ATV. They can get through pretty much everything and anything.
Crazy.
So this moose jumps out in front of me. And typically when a moose is coming at you or jumps out in front of you, you need to just find an aspect of covering that's going to be hard for that moose to move through. So like if it's a big thicket of bushes, you're just jumping in there trying to give yourself a barrier between the moose and you. So this moose jumps out in front of me, and I was like, oh, shit, like, holy cow, like it startled me. I startled the moose because he wasn't expecting me. And before anything, Finn, my dog, just comes ripping around the side, laying a bark, laying a growl, just snarling, like jumping. And I was nervous because a moose, they'll be aggressive towards dogs. And he just starts to drive this moose away just with a level of like viciousness and ferocity I've never seen in a dog. He's just going crazy. And this moose just starts kind of backing up and eventually turns and walks away into the alder. And I was like, holy cow. So I kind of gave him like a whistle. He came back to me and I was like, we are now brothers forever. Like, you are my guy. Like, he literally drove this moose.
So cool.
Just like, I hadn't had him that long, but there was this instinct of protection there. And I went and I actually reached out to a buddy of mine. His name's David Ian Howe, and he's an ethnocynologist. So he studies the relationship of man and dog from the time that we started to domesticate in certain ways wolves, because all wolves, right? All dogs are descended from wolves. So his, professional, in anthropology and degree and doctorate and masters, all that sort of jazz is in ethnocynology. So understanding and breaking down the relationship between man and dog. So I'm like, I called him. I was like, hey, you never believe what I've just discovered. Like, for some reason, me and this new dog, he doesn't know me, I don't know him, but there's like this instinct where he just wanted to protect me, and he just kind of broke it all down where he's like, yeah, man, that's ingrained in all dogs. They have this way of instantly bonding with their owners or their handlers or whatever that term you want to kind of call yourself, and they will go to great lengths regardless of their size or what their breed is to ultimately protect you. Now, in Finn's case, he's a larger dog. He's probably like 75 pounds, and he just has a different level of instinct in him where it was all about protecting you and then turning around and coming back to you, making sure you're okay, wagging the tail. But I was explaining to him that he was walking in front of me, and he goes, he was walking in front of you to like protect you, send a message like, we're out here, I'm out here. Like, this is my guy. He's taking care of me. He's fed me. He's kept me warm at night. Now I'm going to protect him as we are moving through this area. And I'm like, wow. I was completely fascinated.
So
by
cool.
It. Yeah, I was like dumbfounded by it.
Wow. I mean, have you heard those? I don't know if this is proven. I've just heard this from anthropologists that dogs have actually helped human beings evolve. Have you ever heard this idea?
I haven't. I mean, in the aspect of evolution.
Yeah, like I guess like the early relationship kind of came up. Like you have like these sort of like hunter-gatherer groups. Like they're out in the wilderness. Maybe with like a small fire or something, and they're kind of processing a kill that they got or some animal that they have. And then wolves obviously are coming around, and then they're starting to throw scraps. Or like these animals are now living symbiotically with these early Homo sapiens, and then slowly become ingratiated into the group where it's like, hey, we can both be happy. You help us with protection. The dogs will help protect us, especially while we're sleeping. Yeah. And we'll give you food. We'll help keep you warm, and we can both be happy here. Yeah. And over some years, generations rather, as this sort of kind of came about, basically the dogs were able to help the humans sleep deeper. Oh, and that even to this day, apparently they've done sleep studies with humans and dogs that you sleeping on your bed, if you're able to subconsciously hear your dog breathing near you, you actually go into REM sleep faster and you get better quality hours of sleep than someone that doesn't.
Holy fuck. I believe it.
Wild, right?
Instantly.
I got to find the study. Like I got to find the study, but apparently it's true.
You should talk to David Ian Howe because that's his world. I mean, like he's one of those guys where like anything with dogs, that's his jam, and it's like he probably might know something, but that makes total sense.
But think about that: you're an early human. You got to spend so much of your time being on vigilant, high watch. Like, we're gonna get killed. A tribe's gonna come in. A predator, something's gonna try to fuck us up.
And now we got
a little buffer of protection.
Yeah.
Now we can spend a little bit more time thinking. Yeah. Oh, I have an extra hour or two. I can work on this weapon. I can actually. I can. Maybe eat food more. I can get more processing done from this thing because this dog is able to kind of drive predators away. Yeah. So we're able to like buy time, nourishment, better sleep, everything.
That's like the ultimate form of thriving.
Yeah.
When you think about it, because like survival is just getting by, hand to mouth, barely living. It's a struggle. Thriving is exploring the creative process, doing art, making instruments, making ornate things because they're beautiful. And dogs could have given that extra hour, extra 2 hours, better quality sleep to kind of go into that kind of thrive zone. Man, that's fascinating.
Fascinating, right?
Yeah.
And that's why I'm like, we got to respect dogs.
Oh,
like that's why I'm like, we can't eat dogs, even though I get that they're animals, like all these other animals. Like, how come you can eat a deer, but you can't eat a dog? I'm like, because dogs paid their due.
Yeah.
Dogs helped us get here. Like, if deers wanted to do that, they could have. They didn't.
They chose not to.
They chose not to. They were out there just running around, eating my mom's flowers, pissing her off. You know what I mean? But these dogs, they held it down. So it's like, okay, you can sleep on my couch. Yeah. You can sleep in my bed.
No, I get it, man. Like, between my girlfriend and myself, we have 3 dogs. So she has, ironically, the same sort of breed that I have, which is a pit bull husky. And then we went down to, I think we were in St. Lucia. And we went down there with my boys. We did some spear fishing, and we were just, kind of doing our thing. And we were driving off the island, and then there was this guy who had this box in the back of his truck, and it was full of these Great Pyrenees, these bone white dogs on a tropical island. So we got like the runt of the litter, brought her back home. She had parvo, almost died, but now she is fully like integrated with our little clan of dogs. And I brought Finn, her name's May. So I brought Finn and May out into the bush maybe like last October. We're down in this valley. And May, she's bone white. Like, you can't miss her. She's great in the snow. She's got double dew claws. She's a bruiser. A little slow, but she's learning. But so I'm walking up this hill, and May's in the front. Finn's down in the valley below kind of doing his thing. And then all of a sudden I get to the top, and May, she's already up there. And we're getting to my truck. We're leaving, and she just loses her mind. She starts barking and going crazy, just nonstop. And I hear that, and I instantly think, black bear in a tree, mountain lion coming close, or maybe a moose in the distance, but she's staying in one spot and barking. She's not pursuing. So I just start running up there. As soon as I crest the hill, there's a giant bull moose standing up there, just big, huge rack. And he starts coming towards me, like my truck is probably like 10 yards away. And I'm like, May, we got, and I'm like, go, 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 like trying to give her as much, I don't even remember exactly what I'm said, but like, I was like, holy shit, we got to move. And this thing is coming right at us. And sure as shit, without 10 seconds later, Finn just comes ripping up the side, same snarl, same bark, scared the moose where it kind of like popped and jumped back a little bit, which infuriated May. And then before you know it, these two dogs are just driving that moose off. And I got the tail end of it on video, and I got the tail end of Finn on the video when he was driving away like an idiot. I'm like, I gotta videotape this, But
you gotta be proud of your kids, dude.
Oh,
I get
man.
it. You know what I mean?
I was pumped at that point. I was like, the dogs have something in them where it's like own or protect. And like May is a great Pyrenees, so she's like a livestock guardian dog. So there's this instinct in her. Like, she'll hear something, she'll pick her head up, she'll bark. She prefers to be laying outside in the snow. She's a little cuckoo, but dogs have something in them, man.
It's wild. It's on like some low-key spiritual shit. We're like,
yeah.
We're on the same wavelength right now.
Yeah.
What's up, guys? We're gonna take a break really quick because it's 2024, and it's time to talk about something important. When you are seriously hurt, your injury could be worth millions. Yes, that's right. The world is a crazy place, and one person's negligence can result in another's settlement. And that's why I got to talk to you about Morgan & Morgan. Morgan & Morgan is America's largest injury law firm. They have over 100 offices nationwide and over 1,000 lawyers. Yes, these are the big boys. You know them, you see their billboards all over the world. If you ever drove down I-90 from Florida to New York, I'm telling you, you've seen the billboards, all right? Have you ever watched a UFC fight? You've seen them right on the banner. I'm telling you, these are the biggest guys in the game, all right? With over $20 billion recovered for over 500,000 clients, Morgan & Morgan has a proven track record of fighting to get you full and fair compensation. The annoying thing with most attorneys is that in order to submit a claim, you got to call them up, you got to talk to their people, you got to go back and forth on the emails, you got to hope that they see it. They might charge you just to even look at their claim. Here's the cool thing with Morgan & Morgan. With 8 clicks or less, you can submit a claim, and one of their licensed attorneys will take a look at it and get back to you. It's that easy. It's like ordering something off Amazon. It's just a couple clicks. You can submit your claim very easily and cheap. Yeah, how about $0? That's how much it costs to submit a claim with Morgan & Morgan. Extremely easy, no fee required. So, if you are ever injured, you can go check out Morgan & Morgan. Their fee is free unless they win. That's right, unless they win for you. Unless they fight and get you compensation, you're not paying a single dollar. That's a pretty good deal. So, for more information, go to forthepeople.com/Gagnon. That's correct, forthepeople.com/Gagnon, or dial pound law, that's pound 529 from your cell phone. That's for the people, forthepeople.com/Gagnon, or dial pound law, pound 529 from your cell phone. This is a paid advertisement. Now let's get back to the show after this short disclaimer.
It's interesting, and there's only been a handful of times, outside of the military where I've had that opportunity. Inside of the military, which is kind of a weird story, but like I lived as a terrorist for about 60 days. Yeah, I went to a terrorist camp.
Wait, what?
Yeah, so there's a school called a Mirror Image School where you actually go and you live as a terrorist, where you learn to conduct assassinations and build bombs, black market sales, drive-by shootings, the whole 9 yards.
And where was this?
This was in the Marine Corps.
Okay.
So as a counterintelligence agent, one of my jobs was to deny, detect, and deceive terrorism, espionage, sabotage, and subversion. So the best way to do that is to understand how a terrorist mindset thinks and operates and how they go about their day-to-day. So there was an organization that hosted a mirror image program where it took various people from special forces communities, intelligence backgrounds, and just different entities within the DoD, and put us in a place on the West Coast where essentially we lived as terrorists, and who we were going against, or our targets, was a group of federal marshals. And for the entire time, I mean, we prayed 5 times a day. We wore like a dishdasha or shawal kameez. We had a small cell of individuals that were all DoD personnel, but we were truly living and breathing and operating as a small terrorist organization. So when we were combating these guys in an actual combat environment, we understood how they work. We had that ground truth that I spoke about earlier. So you could put yourself in the mindset of someone who's putting a bomb on a road, or who's organizing money financing from point A to point B, how they would transport weapons, what that methodology was, what was the intent, the practice, the purpose. So it gave us the opportunity to kind of see and live and experience that. And like in the military, you don't get a lot of opportunities to do that. But there was, I don't want to say that kind of kicked off my like, I want to experience how everyone else lives, but like I got kind of the darker side on how certain organizations and groups kind of live and think. And then living with the Maasai, Lutske, up in the Dene, up in like the Canadian Arctic, like you get these different opportunities to live with people, and it really shapes how you go about approaching really the world in front of you. Like,
wow. I mean, that is just such a cool experience, because like obviously as you're acting like, a terrorist, is obviously you're doing bad things, quote unquote. But there's also beautiful parts about the culture that are intertwined with it that don't necessarily have anything to do with terrorism, like praying 5 times a day.
That's not a bad thing.
It's like a great practice.
It's absolutely a good thing.
And so you get to be in this mindset where you're like, oh, wow, this actually makes me feel good to, meditate 5 times a day, whatever the thing is, like having a strict devotion to some type of like spiritual practice. You're like, wow, that makes me feel good.
Yeah.
And so you can take that with you and use it in your everyday life.
Yeah. And it's even understanding why they pray 5 times a day, and then understanding when you have the opportunity to talk to someone or an interrogator, there's some sort of engagement, and that time comes up, how important that is to them. Because I know when I was experiencing it, and like I was out doing something, how it impacted me, and like that training and that opportunity. Let's afford them that same opportunity.
You hear a call to prayer and you're like, hey, we're going to halt this. He's going to pray real quick. And you're not just completely ignorant to the cultural aspects.
Exactly. So yes, it was, you're living as a terrorist, but there's so many nuances to it on the significance on the day-to-day and just how everything kind of plays out that my job was to talk with people from all walks of life, from people's of significant interest all the way down to the average, guy that was on the street selling kebabs or trying to make a living fixing cars.
Wow.
In exchange for information through various witting and unwitting, persons. So when you get that opportunity, you kind of get it on that high level visibility here, and then down to the lower level, kind of that everyday Joe, you kind of get the full spectrum on what drives people, whether it's, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, those kind of bottom tier things up to that second tier. It gives you an opportunity to kind of say, what is the motivation in this person's life? How can I impact it in a positive way? Because if it's always a negative impact, it's never going to work out. So even when you're interrogating a 22-year-old young man who put a bomb on the road, 2 things can happen. You can be the ultimate evil in his life and be that stereotype that probably he's been told by various people that you are. Or you can say, have you eaten today? Have you talked to your mother? You haven't? She's probably worried. Let's call your mom. What's your mom's phone number? Hand him the phone. You know,
it's sundown during Ramadan. Like, hey, it's time for you to get some halal food. Let's. Wow.
Yeah. In my 3rd book, I actually fasted during Ramadan during one of my deployments over there, because
the whole season.
The whole season, from sun up to sundown, and the Eid, the giant party at the end was an absolute blast. I'm not going to lie, but the reason why I did it was because a lot of the assets I was talking with during that chunk of time, I'd have experienced it before, that they become very agitated, kind of quick-tempered, because they're hungry, it's hot, there's a lot of things going on, war being one of them. But like, I was like, if I can put myself in that sort of headspace, that same sort of kind of body reference, then I will be able to not only build a better level of rapport with them, but then I'll be able to understand kind of why they're approaching certain subjects here, there, and everywhere. Why they don't want to do things for me at night is because they want to go eat. So, you're kind of trying to break down, who this person is being impacted by this cultural practice, how it, impacts their body. Well, I can sit there and judge from afar, or I can try to immerse myself in that kind of way of thinking in the purest form by actually doing it, and then build that level of rapport and then say, look, man, I'm here with you on this. And then go about doing it.
That's so fun. I cannot wait to tell my Muslim friends that. Yeah, when they start getting mad at me during Ramadan, I'm like, dude, you're not mad, actually. You're just hungry.
That's it.
Okay, so just grab a Snickers and just chill out for a little bit, okay? Because you're bugging me right now.
Yeah, I mean, they eat pretty well at the end, man. I'm not going to lie.
That's wild. Yeah. Okay, so in your time as an interrogator of terrorists, who was the person you sat across from that was most intimidating? That you looked in their eyes and you were like, oh, there is darkness in here. This is scaring me.
Yeah. Oh, man. The first rule in interrogations is you're not going to break everybody, meaning that there's just some people that won't talk no matter what you say or what you do. They're just not going to talk. And I had this one hardcore insurgent. He was like a no-shit insurgent, but this was right on the Syrian border in Al-Qaim. And we had pucked him, placed under control. We pucked him, and he was in there, and he wouldn't say anything, but how he looked at you. And I went through the standard rigmarole, be like, hey, so do you know why you're here today? There's all these different intros and lines and things that you can do, but he just kept looking at me as if I'm going to jump across this table and strangle you and kill you. More importantly, the look that he was given was you're just another meat bag. If I have to kill you now, I will kill you now. And you go through this process of just trying to get him to talk. If you can get someone to talk, that's just a little bit of the window opening. And I want to open the window as wide as possible. I'm not looking for a confession. I'm looking for information. I don't need you to be like, I put the bomb in the road. I already know you did. And this guy had plenty bombs, hidden caches, had done a lot of things, and he was kind of he wasn't up on the HVI target, but he was definitely a key person. And as I finally got in front of him, he just would not budge. You try smoking some French-made cigarettes because that's what they like to smoke over there, and that was a test, right? So, because it's a guy that is within the extreme side of things, they're not going to smoke a cigarette. So it's just, hey man, you want to smoke? I'll light one up. We'll smoke. See if it's just something he's going to do to calm his nerves, or is it an indicator to me that maybe he's putting on a little bit of a show. You want some chai? You want something to eat? Maybe you slide him some food, maybe turn the air. There's all these different things that you can do just to see if I can get a response, because the response could be indicative of a behavior that he's trying to mask or something he's trying to hide. And through that process, this guy just would not talk, kept looking at me. And when I mean looking at you, I'm looking at you now, and then there's people that could stare into your soul, I'm going to get you one day. And he was only if I recall, he's early 30s. So he was senior in his actions and efforts, but still kind of young in the grand design of decision making. But he was a very hardcore dude. And after 72 hours, I just could not get him to budge with anything. And then we just processed him out to a different facility where he went into long-term holding. But over those 3 days, I remember going back to my hooch, and we were on this little CIA compound, and this was a pretty luxurious place for Iraq. There was a makeshift hot tub, and there wasn't a bunch of dudes getting into this hot tub like, hey guys, let's saddle up. It wasn't that sort of thing. But I just remember walking back from the interrogation booth being like, what is this guy's deal? Why? Because usually you can get somebody to talk, probably within the first 30, 40 seconds. Maybe you've got your interpreter, you kick a little Arabic, and the next thing you know, it's I didn't do it. I was told to do it. Or, hey man, you got the wrong guy.
They'll say something.
Something. And that's all you need. That's all you need. He just wouldn't say anything. He wouldn't give his name, and he had clearly some fake documents on him. So I'm trying to do well, we've got these documents, your photos on there. There's different approaches that you run when you're interrogating someone to get, you're always looking to get a free narrative. You're getting them, the target is to get them to talk and just talk and supply words, supply small data points that you can come back an exploit later. So maybe he mentions a car, he mentions a friend, or he mentions a date. That's something I want to come back to. I want him to keep talking because as he's talking, he's giving me a lot of stuff. And then I go back and hit all those points and start to
put the piece together.
Yeah, put the puzzle together, if you will. But he just wouldn't give me anything. He just sat there, looked at me, and I swear to God, if I had like a knife, put it on the table, he probably would have grabbed a knife and shoved it into my throat or something to that extent.
Wow.
But then you get other interrogations where it's the Saudis and the Iraqis, they're in some sort of soccer tournament. You puck a guy, and he's like, what time will I get out of here? And you're like, well, what do you mean? He's like, well, and he's maybe a low-level guy. Maybe he got caught with like an extra AK or something. And you don't really want to mess with him. You just kind of want to find out where'd you get it from. And he's like, well, there is a soccer game, a football game, and I really want to watch it. And you're like, oh, perfect. That's all I need. And then you're not going to let him watch it until, you get what you need out of him as far as the data. But I knew right then and there, he just wants to get out to watch this game. And then he can go about his day. It's probably just like anybody getting rolled up this weekend for being drunk and disorderly, wanting to watch the Super Bowl coming up,
That's worked, using the game as leverage?
Games, calling their parents, congratulating them, which is kind of a weird one. When you congratulate a guy on his, like, look, man, warrior to warrior. We're both warriors here. You're doing your job. I'm doing my job. I know you've taken the lives of people, and you're doing it right by your cause. Now, this is my cause. You're here with me. Now we have to sit down and talk. I respect you for the fight that you have given, warrior to warrior. It's kind of a, I'm not going to sit here and belittle you and beat the crap out of you, but I will respect you because you're a warrior. I'm a fighter. We're both here. We're waged in jihad, You kind of give that kind of like, and this guy's like, you know what? All right. So, you kind of break it down, I'll tell you what, and you kind of maybe share some stories about you. Some are lies, some are the truth, and you try to get him to share a little bit of something, for, hey man, look, brother to brother now, fighter to fighter. I guarantee if you and I were on the streets, we'd be fighting right now, but we're not. We're in here right now. So we can do a couple things. You can sit here, absolutely say nothing. I'm just going to put you back in the cell and you're going to go to a jail and spend the rest of your days there. Or potentially we could get some of those guys that you were mentioned a little bit earlier that aren't that same mentality. They're a little bit softer, a little bit weaker than you.
Wow.
You start to kind of work those. There's so many different angles, but you just need someone to talk. And it's a fun game, especially when on the counter intel side, you're building a profile, you're building a case on some sort of nefarious individual in a village that's, putting bombs or slicing the backs of sheep open, putting opium and drugs in there and then sewing them back up, moving them across a border, someone caching weapons, any number of things. But when you start to like identify these key individuals, you build a case, you start to build some information on them, and then eventually you wind up capturing them. You've got all this kind of stuff, if you will, that you can use against them or, in that interrogation. And again, you're not looking, it's easy when you don't need a confession. We don't need a confession.
Right.
We just want...
You're not prosecuting them necessarily. Exactly. It's like, we just need info.
We just want the info.
Wow.
So how you go... I remember, there was a guy... God, he was... Let me think. This is... I had a buddy, his name was Bob, but it's not really his real name. His real name is Tim Judy, and he'll probably be listening, but everyone called him Silent Bob because he was real quiet. So we just called him Bob. And Bob was a very tech guy, and I was like kind of... infantry background, kind of the guns and shoot 'em up sort of guy. That was, we worked well together. But Bob was really into Xbox. So I was interrogating this guy, and he kept alluding to like America and like the things that Americans had. And one thing that he mentioned was the Xbox and then Jackass, the show Jackass, right? So Bob, for whatever reason, in the middle of Iraq in this compound, he had an Xbox, and I'm thinking, let's get this guy in the Xbox. Let's go down. We'll go down to the compound. We'll get, we'll get this guy in the Xbox, and maybe we can see if we can pull up some Jackass films. Sure shit, did some coordination on my end, and we marched this detainee down to like, kind of like where we're sleeping, if you will, but we kind of like sanitized it, got rid of everything. And there's Bob sitting there playing Xbox. He's playing like Halo 3. I think it just came out at the time. And he's playing Halo 3. As soon as I open the door and this low-level guy sees the Xbox, his eyes light up, and he kind of looks at me, and I'm like, Do you want to go play? And he's like, yeah. So, man, we sat and played Xbox for probably 3 or 4 hours. We put on Jackass. Jackass made him sick. He was watching it, and there was like the era where they were like shoving cars up their butts and like, and drinking piss and stuff like that. And he was like, no, la, 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 no. Just wasn't down with that. But
haram.
That's
haram.
Yeah. But he was all about the Xbox. So, I mean, anything's a...
That's so funny that he was like, yo, I want to see Jackass. And you're like, here's Jackass. He's like, I do not want to see Jackass.
Anything's a button, if you will. And in interrogations and even like, running sources and various things, you just have to find the right buttons, the right motivators that will kind of get people to provide information. Money's a huge factor. Everyone loves their country, but you can love your country and I can give you, $50. $50 will feed your family and you can still love your country. So, no, I love my country, but I will take, $50, no problem.
That's interesting. That's interesting. That's like an old Napoleon quote. I love. So, every man has a price. Yeah. I'm just surprised at how low most people's is. It's
there
wild.
You go, man.
Yeah, that is interesting. Just for a couple bucks, you'd be like, all right, Especially if you're already captured, it's like.
That's what I mean.
Like my options are stay here or get paid and leave.
Yeah. One day I'm going to write another book called Rat Traps and Gatorade. That's going to be the title because I did more positive things in these various environments by glue rat traps and Gatorade powder. So like a lot of these villages that, you'd come across in the Middle East, rats are a huge problem. Like lots of sheep and goats and trash everywhere. So imagine being a young mother, married, you got 1 or 2 kids, relatively young, and there's rats all throughout the area. You show them how to work a glue trap, a rat trap, how to put them in their house, and greatly reduce the number of rats. You now have become a very valuable thing because a simple thing like that shows that you cared. And the next day you're walking around a corner and that little 5 or 6-year-old whose mom and dad you gave the rat traps to comes around the corner and says, don't go this way, because there's someone down there with a suicide vest or something like that. Then you realize how simple things are. You how old's your kid?
I don't have any.
Oh, that's right. But Desitin, you know what Desitin is? No. It's the baby butt cream, like when kids get like diaper rash.
Yeah.
So I had one asset. He came in. He was all flustered and just tired. And I'm like, and I think his code name, if you were his alias, I always call him, was like the freak show, because he would always show up in like ambulances and just random stuff. And I was like, hey man, what's going on? You seem like out of it. He goes, I'm just not getting any sleep. And I'm like, well, what's the problem? And he had a new baby, and this baby had really severe diaper rash. And I was like, I think I have a solution. It's going to take me a little bit, but I have a solution to help you out and get you some sleep. And sleep is important, right?
And this is while you were deployed?
This is while I was deployed. So my job...
He was there with his kid?
No, he was a local. So my job...
Oh, he was a local guy.
Yeah.
Got it.
As a counter intel guy, I ran human sources. So like the CIA has their sort of things. Essentially for the DOD, that's what we would do. Myself and 4 other guys, a small man team. We would meet with various people in various villages in the exchange of information, witting and unwitting sources. And then on the flip side of that, we would also conduct interrogations. So you meet a number of people, and sometimes people just walk in with information like, hey, my neighbor, he was burying 15 AK-47s in his yard. Easy. Cool. Thank you. Some guys have, through various ways, different access to high-value targets. But a lot of that stuff comes in different installments from different assets. You have to piece it together, and you kind of have to solve this Scooby-Doo mystery of who's who in the zoo, what are they doing, why are they doing it, where are they getting their resources and assets from. So this one guy who I talked with for a period of time, he was telling me his baby had this severe butt rash, and I was like, not a problem. Wrote a letter home, got like 50 bottles of this butt rash, American butt rash now, Desitin, and gave him a bottle, and I said, this should help. Gave him a couple bottles, no issues, and he went out there, not a problem. Now the problem with all this is if I give one local national an American-made product, and it solves a problem in his house, that's great. But now I've targeted him as somebody in that village, in that town, that city, who has something he shouldn't have, as simple as a baby butt cream.
Wow.
So when you really think about it, I've now put a target on his back. But since I ordered so many and got so many sent from home, The very next day or that same day, you walk out into that village and you just start handing out the creams. So now there's 40 or 50 people in that village that have those creams. Hey, do you have a baby? Oh yes, here, try this for the butt cream. You come out with an interpreter.
And you create a cover for the guy you're working with.
Everything is a story. You get to build the ultimate story around it. And it seems so simple with some butt cream, but that could have got that guy's head cut off.
Right. Someone sees it. They tell their dad, oh, he had this American product.
Done.
And all of a sudden now you lost info.
Exactly.
Wow.
So it's a whole kind of cat and mouse game, but it's all kind of understanding how that culture lives. And the rat traps, that was one example. And then the Gatorade powder was another example with just the local militias and the local, police. They have water. And like you put a little Gatorade powder in there and they're like, oh my God. I'm like, it's supposed to make you strong. And they drink it and be like, yes, I feel it. I'm strong. And you're like, exactly. So then they're motivated. They got some good stuff and they're, licking their fingers and eating it. But like before you know it, you're known as, at that time, I wasn't a captain, but they call you like Naqib, which is like captain. I looked older, had a little bit of facial hair. You just kind of present yourself a little bit older. Again, it's that kind of like senior guy in the village. They think I'm an important guy. And next thing you know, I'm the guy that's giving them a little bit of Gatorade. Maybe as I'm giving them a pack of Gatorade, you slide, a box of 9mm rounds because they don't have a lot of ammo. So then you're somewhat of importance to them. And they're like, we want to keep him safe. So we want to make sure that we're giving him the correct information and so on and so forth. Like I would deploy with my buddy Tim. We'd go down to the Philippines. The very first thing we would do when we would get down into like southern Philippines or central Philippines, and it's just him and I, board shorts, flip-flops, a pistol shoved down our pants with a backpack full of money, and we're checking into a hotel. And we're changing hotels like every 2 or 3 days.
Like plain clothes, basically.
Plain clothes. Speak a little bit of Tagalog, 6'2" white guy in the Philippines. I stand out like a sore thumb, right? So there's definitely a target. First thing we would do is we'd meet up with the police, local officials, bring them back to our hotel, and we throw a party. Like San Miguel's, all sorts of lechon, all sorts of like Filipino food. And the reason why we throw a party is so we're overt, true name, true rank, true capacity, but they don't really know the exact extent on why we're there and what we're doing there. But we're there with the future planning of a humanitarian sort of mission. So we're there to do that, to prevent terrorism, espionage, sabotage, and subversion, but we also have other targets that we're looking at to establish. So it's kind of like this light cover within the cover.
It's a two-tiered thing.
Exactly.
And so how do you invite these guys to the party?
Hey, just walk up. Hey, man, I'm Sergeant so-and-so or Captain or a Major or whatever it is that you're using. I'm here with this organization, the group that's coming down in the next 4 months. We're here to do some preliminary planning. We'd like to meet with you guys. But tonight we're going to have a little get-together at our house for some of the people who are going to be coming across. You want to come by? Yes, of course. Cool. It's this place at this time. Be there. Chiefs of police, army officials, political officials, invite as many as you can. And then you just have some party. You do photos. I always call them guilty by association photos, shaking hands. How's it going? All this sort of stuff. So Tim and I are doing this, Bob. And then anyone that's watching suddenly realizes that we are potentially well endowed with support in this community. So if it's like a local crime guy or anyone that could be kind of up to nefarious things, like we might not want to mess.
Because the cops are chill with him and he's hanging with this guy.
So it's just kind of establishing a presence in an area. And then when I need to go to the police station, be like, hey, we need to get into this barangay, which is a town in Tagalog. We need to get to this barangay, and but we want to kind of go kind of secretively. We don't want anyone to know us. And I know you guys want to kind of follow us around, but we don't want you to come here. What I need you guys to do is you can send them on a little fake mission. I need you guys to go over here and actually surveil this for me. You guys are trained in surveillance, right? Cool. Well, we're going to shoot down in here. Now, we're not really going down there. We're telling them we're going down because they're going to put somebody on us. We're actually going to send Bob down there. He's going to be looking at X, Y, and Z, and I'm going to be 3 towns over actually scanning the roads to make sure we can get the necessary vehicles down there for when this main effort comes in. So it's a whole cat and mouse
constant
game.
chess going on.
It's awesome. It's so much fun.
Yeah.
So much fun. And it's, you're in your 20s and like, you just got a backpack full of money, like pesos, Filipino pesos, and you're like, well, all right, this is, we got pistols, we got money. You feel like a gangster in certain ways, but you're all there to do good and to like, again, prevent terrorism, espionage, sabotage, subversion through Denial, detection, and deception.
Wow.
Yeah, deny, detect, and deceive.
All in total, how long were you deployed for in any particular place outside the country?
Yeah, I mean, so I did a lot of like the standard deployments, which was like that 7-8 month window, but I did a lot of them that were Iraq 7-8 months, come back for a month, and then deploy to the Philippines for 3 or 4 months.
It's like non-consecutive deployments.
Yeah, they were just kind of like back to back to backs.
Wow.
And like prior to 9/11, I did some like the standard UDPs to, you know, like on a ship to like Okinawa, Thailand, Malaysia, Indonesia, those sort of things. And then in the infantry, same sort of stuff. And then in the counter intel side, that same sort of window. Like when I was stationed in Okinawa, Japan, you're kind of on the edge of like Southeast Asia, all that kind of country, if you will. So there's a lot of deployments, a lot of things you're doing. Like it's kind of a funky world. And then even in the stateside, like on the east or on the west coast of Vegas, you're meeting with a guy that could be a potential terrorist as you're working with NCIS and like an FBI sort of surveillance team. You stage yourself as a guy who's hiring role players for this military exercise, and he's showing extra interest, but puts a target on his back. And then you're meeting. Wow. There's just so many different kind of worlds of chaos that's going on that not a lot of people know about.
What's up, guys? We're going to take a break really quick because we got to talk about your amazing dick game. Yes, you right now, listen to my voice, my deep, soothing voice. You have an amazing dick game. Or maybe you know someone with an amazing dick game. Maybe you got a boyfriend. Who knows? But if you have an amazing dick game, there's a way that you can make it better. And that's with the good people over at Bluechew. Bluechew is an amazing service that basically delivers a chewable tablet that has the same active ingredients as Viagra, Cialis, all that stuff, but this is the chew. It's at a fraction of a cost, and it's never been easier to get your hands on the greatest dick game of your life. Never been easier. I'm telling you. You can go to bluechew.com and you can submit all your information to a licensed person, a legit person that will then mail you a discreet, very unassuming, but very, very powerful package. You know what I'm talking about? The powerful package to your home. That's how easy it is. You don't got to go talk to a doctor and be like, yeah, you know, I want, nope, easy. You got to just go on the internet, bluechew.com. I want to get the best dick given of my life. And that's how you do it. Easy as that. And for the listeners of this show, of this program, you are going to get free first month of Bluechew. You're going to be getting Bluechew for free. All you got to do is pay $5 shipping. That's a cup of coffee. Black to be delivering that BBC. You know what I'm saying? That's bluechew.com, BLUECHEW.com. Use the promo code GAGNON, GAGNON, and receive your first month for free. That's bluechew.com for more details and important safety information. And thank you so much, Bluechew. I'm telling you, man, check out this product. Even if you're one of these people that's like, I don't know, I don't really need it. What are you talking about? It could be better. It can always be better. Let's say you're in the 1%, you're about to be in the 0.01% with Bluechew. Now let's get back to the show. What was your closest brush with death in your time that you were in the military?
So there was a couple. One of them was that same asset, the clown show, the freak show. He had visibility in a relationship with a high value target in the area. And I only really found this out maybe about 3 months into it because they were once long-term friends. My guy kind of went an official route within military representation, and his buddy, lifelong childhood friend, became like a hardcore insurgent. And when he left, he asked my guy to keep eyes on his family and his wife and his mother and his father and all that sort of stuff. So they were in the town, but we were always kind of watching the town. And when that was going on, we started to run a little bit more patrols. We wanted to create a presence around his personal family to provoke him to contact my guy, my asset. And it worked. Contacted my asset, and before you know it, he wanted to get his family out of there, and he wanted some of his like personal effects, if you will, because he just wanted to leave this section of Iraq, which was right on the Syrian border. So with my asset, who didn't like that he was associated with him, even as a child, because it still kind of dampened his progression in certain aspects in the political sphere and the military, so on and so forth. He's like, I really want to get him and I need your help. I'm like, we can do this. So we spent 2-3 months building this whole package and this way to get his boy, his old friend, back into the town so we could capture him or kill him.
And he came to you to get his friend?
He came to me.
Wow.
So it was one of those things that, you know, the first kind of interaction, you listen, you kind of pull out different data points and you have to vet and validate send name information, see the authenticity.
It seems like a setup almost. Like,
yeah, it could be.
This guy coming to you being like, hey, come get my boy, my childhood friend.
Yeah.
Like,
but this guy was well known, super well known as who he was and what he was doing. And there was hundreds of reports on him. But this was the first time somebody actually had a personal connection. More importantly, was in communication with him to the day. So spent a lot of time developing him, coaching him, teaching him, and how we were going to go about doing this. And again, this isn't me like, all right, step one, we're going to do this. It's all through elicitation and subtle suggestion, because I can't let him know the exact time and place that we actually want to capture this guy, because there could be that sudden gut feeling like, you know what, he's a longtime friend. Don't come in on this day because they're waiting for it.
wow.
So you have to do things in a way where...
So this guy's working with you, but you're even keeping information from him.
Absolutely, the whole time, because it could ultimately compromise everything. Anything you say could compromise him and the overall mission of capture killing this guy. So long story short is, through their conversations, this guy had an AK-47 that was his brother's, who was killed by Americans, and my guy had it. He had it safeguarded. It was cached in his house, and that's fine. I'll let my guys, they can cache their weapons and do what they need to do. But I said, well, before we get it to him, let's bring it in. Let me get some serial numbers just so we know it's the right one, the whole 9 yards. More importantly, let me clean it up. So when you do hand it over to him, he sees that it's been taken care of, everything's good in that relationship. And my guy's like, absolutely. So he came in, handed me the AK. I said, give me 24 hours, just let me make it beautiful for you. He said, sure thing. So he leaves, I take the AK, I go up to this ODA that we were attached with, and we start putting all sorts of things inside this gun to be able to track it, if you know what I mean. Yeah. Clean it up, make it look all fancy, the whole 9 yards. My guy shows up the next day. Now, from the time he gave me the AK to the time that I'm giving the AK, things had kind of transpired where his buddy was going to be coming into town, but on the outskirts of the town, this place called the Ibrahim Quarries. I'll never forget the name because this is where all the shit went down. And he was like, I'm going to meet him on the outside of the Ibrahim Quarries. And when I hand him this weapon, I don't know really what you want me to do. I'm like, nothing, my guy. I got the serial number. I just want to know that, like, it was once in your hands. And I'm not saying, hey, there's, you know, trackers or anything to that sort of nature in this. He's like, okay, I feel good about that. I'm like, as a matter of fact, all I want you to do is, I wanted him to have his phone on him so we could, you know, look at various things. And when you are done and you hand off the weapon, all I want you to do is call me as soon as you are out of visual sight of this guy. I don't want you to hand it to him, jump in your car and be like,
he got it.
Yeah. You know, there's all those sort of things. I'm like, this is just for your safety. We don't want him to get, you know, crazy or anything to that extent. He's like, absolutely. So we go through all this. We set everything up. We have several vehicles stripped down with several guys hanging off the sides. It's just like this big, big event.
Wow.
My asset winds up handing off the gun, gets out of sight, calls him. And then soon as he calls him, he takes off. We start rolling out. We're kind of already creeping out in certain ways, but not far enough where anyone's going to be able to spot us and key them off. And then it turns into like this desert high-speed chase where these guys are driving, and they're driving like 2 or 3 of these white, like little Isuzu sort of pickup trucks. And then they start making their way to the top of the Ibrahim Quarries. As they're making their way up to the top, there's like 4 gun trucks making their way up. So we're following them. They're shooting up there, and we're far enough away where we're creating a signature in the dirt, but not where they can really like PID us or like positively identify us. So they're going up there probably because for any number of reasons, but that's the route they're going. While we're slowly making our way up, they're cresting out at the top. And a couple Black Hawks are starting to launch because we were afraid we were going to lose them up in this giant quarry. We didn't want to lose them. So as we get up there, we see that the 3 vehicles have pulled off to the side, and we slowly like make our way to the top, and all the guys are outside of their vehicles. And as soon as they see these military vehicles run up to the top, it's just like Chaos ensues. A couple guys start shooting. Everyone jumps out of the vehicles, kind of does their specific immediate actions. And then the one guy that we were targeting, and it's actually on helo footage, which is the craziest thing to actually have, like footage wise. So there's all these sort of things. A couple guys get killed over here. A couple guys get killed over here. The one main guy's like in the middle, and he's like kicking out all this stuff. And it's myself and this other Marine slowly working our way towards him. And soon as, you know, we're working our way, he's like, yeah, he's just saying all this sort of stuff. You're never going to take me. And we're, you know, KF, get down, all that. Because we wanted to take him alive ultimately, because he's a wealth of knowledge, the whole 9 yards. And then as we are saying that, he's screaming and yelling. And we see him kind of go into his pockets, fix something onto his hands, and starts to raise his hands and just boom, raises his hands. And when we think of an S-vest, it's not a movie S-vest where there's cool wires and all this sort of crazy stuff. Typically, it's like a load-bearing vest with a bunch of grenade fuses, maybe some nails and some various other things kind of taped around. And what they do is they would put 2 grenade pins tied on a fishing line onto their sides of their pockets, or just run them down their shirt sleeve, and then just raise their hands like, hey, put your hands up. Boom. So you can't really see him. As soon as we saw him kind of go into his pockets and like hook his thumbs and then raise his arms, he just detonated himself. And there was just mass and meat and just stuff flying ever. But on the helo footage, so you could see us closing in. And then as soon as he goes into his pockets, we kind of stop, get ready to like shoot, because like we really wanted to take him alive. And then all of a sudden, as he's raising up, you can kind of see us taking like one step knee, getting down, and he just detonates himself. And in the footage, it's just this like poof, this cloud of chunks and then like dust flying, helos flying overhead. It settles, and then like I can't remember. I think it was like a corporal. He goes, he just walks away, just walks out of like the shot, and then after that, you have to do like this site exploitation where you got to sift through the body pieces and look for like fingers and DNA and all this sort of stuff.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, it was a mess. But the vehicles that they all jumped out of, the guys that got killed, one vehicle was loaded full of like IEDs, and IEDs that were so unexpected, where it was couch cushion foam. And so again, you have like mine and detectors that can detect IEDs, but this was the foam of a couch. So think of like a shoebox, and you take a plug out of it, and you have a wire that runs to the foam on the bottom, and then the wire that runs to the foam where that plug's taken out of, and just anything could step on it, connect
two
the
wires touch, boom,
and it explodes. But there's nothing metal there. It's just the connection of the
two
circuits,
little wires,
two little wires, a little battery pack, and that's it.
Wow.
So just crazy stuff. A Bic pen, you know, like the clear ones with 2 wires on one side and a little ball bearing that when it rolls, it connects. Their vehicle was littered. I mean, I don't have the photos this day, but we, have the photos of everything that was in the vehicle, and you like lay it out. Like, you ever seen those Instagram photos when someone's going camping and they're like laying it out stuff? That's what it was, but it was bags of money and AKs, and sure as anything, that same AK that my guy put in his hands, which was our one golden nugget, because no matter where the vehicle went, because you got to think, like, even like tracking a phone or anything like that, well, you're only tracking the phone. It doesn't mean that that person has the phone in their hand. So we always knew that the vehicle, the weapon would be associated with the vehicle, and very likely he's rolling with an entourage, so they're not just going to like split up or anything. They're all going to be together. So as long as it was in that little bubble, we had a positive track, and we could ultimately follow him.
Wow.
Yeah.
How were you like? How did you feel when you were walking up to this guy, and you're just like, oh, he's got a vest?
It was definitely, kind of a surreal moment, because it wasn't like your first time walking up to somebody that was not complying or anything in that capacity. It was more along the lines of like, I wanted him alive because I had dedicated. This wasn't like your random, insurgent you get in a firefight with. This is a guy like, I knew his wife, I knew his kids, his mother, his father, I knew his whole background.
You've been tracking him for months.
Tracking him. So for me, I really wanted him. I wanted to sit down and talk with him. I also wanted him dead, but I knew there was a wealth of information. So not that there was a reluctancy to put a bullet in his face, but I also knew the value. We could kill one guy, but if I could talk with this guy there would no be 3-day waiting period because he was a high value target.
We could neutralize the whole threat.
There could be so many more live saves. We could take one. We could probably save so many more because he would probably eventually get killed or stabbed in prison, which is fine. But like, I wanted him alive because there was so much stuff that he would have known that could have just done so many different things. Because soon as a target gets killed, all that information, it's done.
Gone forever.
It's gone. So it's even when you capture like an HVI or an HVT, you don't want anybody in the village or a town or city to know, because soon as he's placed in our control, anything that could be happening no longer happens. So we want people to think everything's hunky-dory. Well, why aren't we talking with this guy? We don't know, but we still need to execute the plan, blah, blah, blah. That's what they're thinking. Because remember that like mirror image school, there is 2 different ways information is passed. It's in a chain or it's in a spider web. There's a center point and then branches coming off. So if he's in that center point, these guys around the edges still might be executing their tasks because they don't know about the other ones. In the chain, there's just one to the next to the next. Wow. So you try to think about, if we do puck this guy and we do have him in our control, there's a golden window of information where it's going to be hot. So whether it's, 48, 72 hours, anything that was planned could still be happening. That's our golden opportunity to actually target those efforts that they're doing to, ultimately stop it or take it. If a week goes by, nobody's heard from him, they probably consider he's been pucked and all current operations shift to something else.
Cease or move somewhere else. I mean, that's a pretty close call. How close were you to the guy before he detonated?
I say it was about 45 yards, 40 yards, enough to feel the, and that wasn't the first S-vest. Like, we walked around a corner once, and when it's July in the Middle East and there's a guy wearing an old starter jacket, remember the old starter jackets? And you're like,
seems a little weird.
This motherfucker's going to be burning up. And then all of a sudden you see him start moving, but as he's moving, he starts pumping his arms and then detonates himself on accident. Like, that sort of thing.
That's happened?
Oh yeah, man. There's been plenty of S-vests and IEDs, and then, sniper fire, troops in, there's so many different things that are always happening.
Accidental though?
Yeah, accidental. Like, there's been guys, this is funny. I actually had a guy that he was a walk-in. He came into me and he wanted to tell me about a bomb maker that was in this one area. And I was like, okay. That's what the guard told me. Like, hey, there's a guy who wants to talk to you, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, all right, bring him on in. So he comes in, and when he comes in, he's on crutches. He's missing one leg and then 4 or 5 fingers on like one hand. And I'm like, okay. So I start listening to his story. Keep in mind, missing a leg, 4 or 5 fingers. So he's telling me all this stuff. And I use information processing in a very logical way. So if I'm, questioning you and you're telling me about a neighbor of yours who is bearing weapons in the backyard, I'm going to ask some questions. I'm like, all right, well, where are you observing this neighbor? I'm observing from inside my house. All right, what's between you and the observation point? Well, I have a window. Okay. Is the window clean? Is it dirty? Is there a wall? What sort of things? Okay. Then I'm listening to his answers. If he's giving me very specific information, like, well, all right, well, let's talk about these weapons. What's the condition? Oh, the weapons are in great condition. Well, what do you mean great condition? There's still oil on them, as a matter of fact. Really? You don't think they've ever been fired? No. One of them actually had a plug in the barrel to prevent dirt going down. So what he's giving me is micro information from a macro vantage point. Those two don't match up. He should be able to give me information like, it's really hard to tell.
Yeah, there's some guns there.
I don't know what they are.
Yeah, you'd have to ask this guy.
Exactly. So then when this guy came in who's missing a leg, missing several fingers, talking to me about a guy that's building bomb and a bomb making factory, all these sort of things, I quickly put 2 and 2 together and say, well, I know why you're missing all these things. He used to build bombs. So now I'm like, all right, just level with me, my guy. Are you doing this, or do you have experience in the past? And experience in the past is fine. No issues there. And he's like, yes, a long time ago, blah, 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 blah. That's how I lost the ones in my hand. I'm like, well, what about your leg? He goes, no, that was a tractor. I'm like, all right, well, it worked out either way. But ironically, the whole time, and he like got it, like ran over or something, and they had to cut it off.
Damn.
But he gave me all this information. And as we're sitting talking like this, I see him keep looking over my shoulder. And I'm like, I knew exactly what he was looking at. And I'm like, you looking over there? He's like, yes. And what was hanging up was a prosthetic leg. So I don't know if he had heard that there was a prosthetic leg in there or it just happened to be, but he just was so interested in that prosthetic leg. And I was like, I'm not talking like this is like, it looks like a mannequin leg with like a strap and just really gnarly.
Yeah, it's a pirate's
pretty much.
leg.
He wanted to be a pirate. So as we're talking, and I'm able to quickly kind of vet his information because what he was saying makes sense. It was actually corroborating information. We had some other stuff out of it. So it was good. I was like, I'll tell you what, man, if you want this, I'll give it to you in 3 days. And he's like, why 3 days? I'm like, well, because if you walk out of here right now, walking without your crutches or you've got another leg, that's going to be a problem. People are going to clearly see that there was an exchange of something. Because why did you tell people you were coming here? Oh, I told them I came in here because you guys knocked down part of my wall or something like that. I'm like, all right, that makes sense. But if I give you a leg, it's not going to match up.
Yeah, you went in there, yelled at them about your wall, and they gave you a leg?
Exactly.
It seems unlikely.
Usually you'd get some money, right? So like in 3 days, we'll be out in town. We'll be doing some humanitarian stuff. I'll have it with me. I'll give you it then. Make sure everyone sees that I gave it to you. Then they know that's how you actually acquired it. So yeah, like that guy, he gave us all the information, cooperated with some stuff, but something as simple as a leg can be a huge motivator for, a guy that doesn't have one, used to build bombs, missing several fingers.
Wow.
There's so many unique stories around the humans you come across and sort of like wartime. Because I had the unique opportunity to sit down and talk with them for hours.
Intelligence is a different,
totally.
Is a different relationship.
Totally.
You're not just like executing missions. You're actually like connecting with people. You have to learn their names. You have to learn about their kids.
Absolutely.
Like, oh, you watch American football? No way. What team do you like? Yeah, it's really, really interesting. Who were some of the people that you met while you were deployed that like you still think about or you still keep in touch with? Was there anyone that just like warmed your heart? You're like, oh, you're such a pure guy and you're just in a shitty situation.
Yes, there's one in particular, but he wasn't a pure guy. His name was Muj Killer. Muj Killer was my favorite human being next to Moses. Muj Killer was probably the most hardcore man I had ever come across. He had been shot in 4 or 5 times all over his upper body. He walked with this steady Frankenstein limp where he dragged his foot because he got his ankle took a ricochet and ripped half of his ankle off. He just patched it up. His cousin was kidnapped by these insurgents one day, and he got on a bullhorn and walked through the streets and said, if you don't hand over my brother, I will execute everyone street by street. And he was definitely loony. But I had this philosophy. Thugs get hugs. I wanted the worst people as possible because they always provided the best info. They were very upfront. They're like, look, I love Syrian whiskey. I love whiskey. And I'm like, cool. Well, let's drink some whiskey and let's talk. I love, pornographic magazines. Cool. This is the military. There's millions of pornos. Not a problem. So we'd sit there and do a debrief and he would look at white women's breasts the entire time. And he absolutely looked, can I keep this? I'm like, okay, you can keep it.
While you guys are talking, you're just like thumbing through it?
Yeah. And that's fine. And then when he wasn't cooperating, I'd be like, let's close this right here,
Like, no.
But MK was a very unique guy. And the reason why is prior to us, right at the invasion of Iraq, he was actually an insurgent. He will humbly admit that he has shot and probably killed many of military personnel. He's not proud of it, but there was a point where he was like, I can't be doing this. This is horrible. I need to make a change in my life. And he actually enrolled himself into the police force. Now, this is at a time when basically you were fighting against Americans, or you could put down your rifle and be like, you know what? I'll work with you guys. And we were kind of like, okay, don't do it again. Shame on you. You're now a police officer.
Wow.
Here's some stripes.
And it was just a change of heart.
Just a change of heart, man. That's what he described to me. He's like, I didn't think you guys kept coming. It just wasn't going to work. And when he joined the police is when a lot of his craziness came in, because now he had some official power. He had a little sewn-on badge.
Power. Wow.
And that's what brought MK to the point of like, he was a local thug. And there was one time he called me up. He's like, Naqib, my cousin's brother, sister, whatever, is dead. I'm going to start killing people if you don't come out here. And I'm like, MK, do not do a thing. And like everyone on my battle position knew of MK. I mean, he was a police guy. So I'm like, I need to go out there. I need to talk with him. So I go out and there's this guy, Gutierrez. Me and Gutierrez, we head out. And sure as anything, MK's cousins, brothers, sisters, whatever, was beaten to death and then shoved in a rice bag, but his mouth was taped shut. And I'm like, Jesus Christ, MK. I'm like, what the hell? So he's explaining it to me. I'm like, well, what do you think happened? He goes, I don't know. But he goes, whoever has this rice bag and this tape, I'm going to shoot on sight. And I'm like, MK, everyone here has rice bags and everyone here has tape. So we're starting to do like this CSI thing, trying to like piece all these things together. And I'm like, I need to know who he is and like the relationship, like where does he sleep? That's like my point of origin. So he brings me to the house where he sleeps. We start talking with his mom and dad. And come to find out, he was actually in love with this one gal who was like 4 or 5 doors down. They weren't related in the family, but he kept trying to like court her, I guess, in certain ways. He was always kind of hanging around, and she had 2 older brothers that were affiliated with like this local cement company. So between the brothers, the girl, and now the young guy that was dead in the back, we piece it together, and eventually you make it to the girl's house where the brothers are. And sure as shit, like we can see that there has been a body dragged from the front inside their little compound. And inside their compound was like a little kind of tool house, if you will. And inside that tool house was a stacked thing of rice bags and a shit ton of that tape. And he's looking at me like, I told you. And I'm like, okay. But these guys weren't home. So basically, he had gone over and said, the parents were kind of explaining that the guy had gone over and said, hey, I want to court your daughter. Like there's like an official process. The dad was home. The mother wasn't talking. He said, she'll be home shortly. And then the brothers came down and said, yeah, she'll be down. And they were talking with him kind of in the front of the house. The dad walked away and said, why don't you go meet her in that little room over there and you guys can have some private time to talk? Which seems very weird because that's not a very normal thing to have private time with someone you're not married to in that sort of culture. But he was driven by the eternal fucking, to like, yeah, I'll do that. So he went and waited by this house, and the brothers went over there, basically beat him to death, choked him, taped his mouth shut, and then shoved his body in this giant rice bag and then threw it in the back of somebody else's truck, trying to blame them for it.
And why do they want to kill this guy?
Because he was courting their sister.
Just because
that was it. Different tribe, different. There could be a number of differences, but
culture, different type of Muslim, something.
And
they said, you're not going to date our sister.
Yeah. And there probably was a little scuffle there, but
they just killed him.
Just killed him.
Wow.
So MK's livid because this is his blood relative, and he's from the Karbuli tribe. And the Karbulis, you just don't. You don't fuck with. I'm telling you. I've heard some of your podcasts with some of these mafia guys, and like, I'm like, Karbuli's way different. Like any of those, like you just wouldn't do it. I mean, not only will they kill you, they'll make sure that you're alive when they kill everyone else in your family and then feed you. Like just some hardcore people, right? So MK, he's a Karbuli, and he's a Karbuli with some power. So as all of this is going on, he gets a radio call that they got the 2. Now he doesn't feed me that, hey, the police have actually caught them, because as soon as we found out and saw all the stuff that kind of took place at the house, a couple of the other police sent out messages, we're looking for these 2 guys. And then he got a call that they had actually captured him. So I'm talking to Gutierrez. We're kind of brainstorming like, all right, we got to find these guys. And all of a sudden I see just taillights and dirt, and MK's driving away. And I know exactly where he's going, because typically when they capture someone, they bring them to the local police. And I'm like, we got to get there, because they're going to do an EJK, which is an extrajudicial killing or tribal killing. And I'm like, we cannot have this. If this happens, like, we're never going to gain any sort of like sanity or peace here. So then me and Gutierrez are like running after MK's vehicle. We jump in a Humvee, drive to the police station. And sure shit, as we're driving in, MK is pulling these 2 guys out of another police vehicle. And I'm like, MK, do not do it. He's like, Nakib, I want to kill. And I'm like, don't do it. I'm like pleading with him, don't kill, because like, extrajudicial killings was very common, where like somebody wronged you, they would just kill you because it's a tribal justice. And they're trying to instill a facet of law there. And if they keep going tribal, they'll never have law. And then
especially this guy's now a cop.
Exactly.
Like, he's like representing y'all.
Exactly. So he kind of like calms down. They throw those 2 guys in a cell, and then we all kind of filter into this police station. And now in this police station, there's me, Gutierrez, probably like 3 other Marines standing outside, chilling out, kind of pulling security. and then 7 or 8 tribal sheikhs, police, army, and it is just not a brawl, but like a huge argument.
A town hall.
Just a town hall. Chaos is erupting. I'm like, Gutierrez, we got to do something. And like every once in a while in your life, you like stand up and you give that like Braveheart speech, you know what I mean? Like where he's riding in front of everyone, they can take our lives. So I stand up and like as much Arabic as I'm kicking, I'm like, look, you fucking savages, if you want to live like this, you can, but we need to think about the future. And I'm trying to like do the Marine Corps thing and like build a community. Hindsight's 2020. And I'm giving this like whole like monologue and some of these sheikhs are nodding. I'm like, I think I'm getting through to them. They're shaking their heads. MK's kind of looking like, this is not the Naquib Don. Because I would tell MK, he's like, this guy's bad. I'm like, go get him. You're the police. If he's bad and he's legitimately bad, go get him. And then we can work together to figure it out. Which isn't the best advice because I was very open about him. Like, just go fucking snatch these guys. Why? It saves me reports. If you know he's bad, you guys already have a case. He's like, well, I'm just telling him. Like, you can tell me all you want. If you want to bring him here, I'll talk to him first. But go get him. That's your job, guy.
So he's looking at you like, yo, this is the one time I have a personal grievance. Exactly. Like, let me do my thing.
Let me do my thing.
And now you're saying not to?
I know, which is so hard because I'm like, bullets are way easier to do than fucking reports, let me tell you. So I'm like, all right, everyone calm down. We need to do this the right way. Let's prosecute him in accordance to Iraqi law. Let's do this the right way. And before you know it, everyone's heads are shaking. MK's getting a little flustered, the whole 9 yards. I'm like, tribal justice is an important thing, but it should relate to things over land, over disputes, over things that don't result in like life and death and all this sort of stuff. And before you know it, everyone's north-south. Everyone's nodding. And I'm like, all right, Gutierrez, I think I'm getting to him. So we calm down. Everyone's drinking some chai. They're in the detention room. And like, I'm like, all right, so we're leaving. Me and Gut, we're out the door. We're bringing the Marines back. We know what's going to happen. We kind of set a plan. Tomorrow, you guys are going to hold a trial. The whole 9 yards in accordance with your law, Iraqi law. That's what we're here to do.
Yes.
We got this, guy.
Justice, rule of the land.
Yes.
Don't fucking kill anybody.
Don't kill anybody. And sure as shit, we're walking out. We're jumping back into our Humvee. We go back to our battle position, which is maybe like 10 minutes away. Night's, still there.
You look at Gutierrez, you're like, that was a close one.
Yeah, I was like, we got through this one. He's like, yeah, man. He's like, it was like a CSI thing. I'm like, absolutely. So as it's kind of transpiring, we're maybe back 10, 15 minutes, and then we hear Tower 1. He's like, we definitely have just because you could from like Tower 1, you could see down into the Ville. And sure as shit, Tower 1 is relaying like, we got a lot of lights on the police station. There's a large circle of men, and they had just dragged these 2 guys out. MK didn't do it, but this is the funniest part. Well, it's not funny, but funny. These 2 guys got dragged out, and their village, like their sheikhs, their leaders that was kind of in charge of their tribe, shot them both dead. And then everyone started raising their AKs, started shooting it up in the air. Like, no, fuck Iraqi law. This is tribal law. This is Kabuli country. This is how we're doing it. And so he's radioing in. We're listening. And I'm like, sure as shit. As soon as the gunshots started going off,
God damn it,
I was like,
MK.
Please, just tell me it isn't MK. Please. So then we go right back out there. There's 2 dead bodies there. They're kind of looking at me. The crowd disperses, and MK's like, wasn't me. Wasn't me. I didn't do it. It was not me, Naquib. I did not do it. I'm like, all right, MK. Thank you. Thank you, MK. I appreciate it. But it's those sort of things like,
I mean,
it's
insane.
It's just nonstop, man. There's always something going on. I mean, there's so.
But I mean, how do you expect to undo like generations of how people do shit? You know what I mean? Like that's how they've been doing shit for mad long. You're not just gonna roll in and be like, hey guys, we're gonna have a trial. They're like, no, this guy killed my cousin.
Exactly. And I'm
gonna kill him.
And I think after a while, I started to accept the fact that like I shouldn't be here to try to impact how they've lived for generations upon generations. Babylon, I mean, that is a rich culture and history there.
Yeah.
I'm not going to make a change. What I can do is just make sure Marines don't get killed, civilians don't get killed. So after that, it was easy to kind of shape my approaches going forward, being like, I'm here to save lives. What happens in this country after I leave and probably come back again and again, that's in their hands. Like, I'm here to just make sure Marines don't die.
MK is a wild dude.
Yeah, Muj Killer, man.
And what does Muj mean?
Muj is like Mujahideen. So for him, when he became the police officer, he adopted the name Muj because he would, well, basically when he became a cop, he went out and killed all of his old adversaries that were like insurgents. He knew where they were, how they lived, which allowed him to rise up in the ranks very, very quickly. How MK, one day I was back on this main base, and I used to like meeting with MK because he was a thug. He was a thug cop that got a lot of hugs from me. Just a good guy. And we're walking through this section of the base. He's like, "Hey, that's mine." I'm like, what are you talking? He points over to this tanker, this water tanker. And I'm like, "What do you mean that's yours?" He goes, No, that is mine. He used to deliver water when he was an insurgent to pass information. And they would also smuggle weapons inside the tanker. And I'm like, there's no way, MK. Because usually these guys are looking to get something from us they can turn around and sell and make some extra cash. I'm like, there's no way. He goes, no. And he went and explained that in the bottom of the tanker, there's a cutout and like all these various things. And we went over there and looked. I'm like, sure as shit, that was his tanker. And I'm like, well, what is it doing here? He goes, one day, like an Apache helicopter came and started shooting me up. I rolled out of the ditch. It kept rolling. They kept flying by. I got up, dusted myself off. It didn't work. They dragged it back here. I'm like, what the fuck? just when he went to get his second wife, there was a guy. He went down to the local like judge, justice of the peace, if you will. So he's in there with his, I think he had 2 sons that were young and like some family members. He was in there and he kind of looked like Tom Selleck.
Yeah.
But like mustache, Tim, and he'd be like drinking whiskey. So he's in there. And as he's in there, the gal that he was marrying, he kind of stole her from another dude. So he went in there to go kill MK. And sure as anything, they're like
to kill him like on is that like a wedding day or?
No, it wasn't like an official wedding. They were doing their legal paperwork in the eyes of like the law. So they were legally married because then as a police officer in that time, they were trying to establish benefits for, family members and stuff like that.
So he's doing the paperwork to make this woman his second wife. And all of a sudden the ex-boyfriend shows up.
Her ex-boyfriend shows up and he goes in there and like an idiot, he announces, and this is MK's telling me, he goes, I won't say his name, but he's like, she's mine. I'm going to stop you this whole 9 yards. So he gave this 10-second monologue. And as the guy is saying this, he's got a pistol down on his side. MK just turns around, sees that he has a pistol, turns around, shoots him 3 times, turns around, finishes his paperwork. Everyone's kind of screaming and going kind of crazy. And the next thing you know, the girl signs the paperwork and he kind of said, I put my arm around and we leave. Step over the body. I'm like, MK, what? Dude, my guy, like.
That's crazy.
He was.
That's like you want to talk about red pill, like fucking wild boy.
He was the craziest human being I've ever come across.
Yo, her ex-boyfriend pulled up. He started talking some shit, had this gun with him. I put 3 hot ones in him. Signed the paperwork, walked over with his bitch. What you gonna do about it? That's crazy.
It is crazy, and it almost doesn't sound real.
There's no way, dude. It's so.
But
wild.
it fits in line with all the things I have witnessed this man do. Where I'm just like, oh my god, he's probably dead today, without a doubt. But like,
he's a cowboy. He's just a cowboy.
He's the ultimate carbuli. He really was. He was one of those guys that just. He was all about the tribe, but as soon as he got that badge, that little embroidered badge on a t-shirt, he was like, I'm above the law. Like, I'm literally above the law. I'm God. And he literally took that to the point where, I mean, I don't even think I finished the story where when he was on the megaphone, someone took his cousin and he went down the street saying, if you don't, and these are insurgents that took his cousin.
Like the cousin that killed.
Not the different cousin. There's a lot of cousins.
What was the story?
So MK, when I was talking about him, there was one time where his name was Jafar, and Jafar was kidnapped.
Now you're lying, bro.
No, I'm serious.
His name was literally Jafar?
Jafar got captured, but it was so quick, and it happened in the town. So the police station's here. I guess Jafar was walking to the police station, and then somebody ran in and said, hey, I just saw Jafar get taken into a house, and he was, struggling. So MK just gets on this bullhorn, and he kind of knew the street it was, but walked down that street and said, whoever has my cousin Jafar, if you do not release him, I will start executing everyone house by house by house. Now, keep in mind, people in this town know him, and they're like, he's probably going to do it. So he starts going around, I'll give you a count of this, and then before you know it, he sees Jafar tumble outside of a door. and Jafar had like a couple broken fingers, just beaten up in the face. He literally walks in that doorway, goes into the house, and like there's gunshots, there's shooting, there's all sorts of stuff, and maybe one or two other guys. And MK was always like the lone wolf, but there was always somebody else with him. Went in there and killed like 2 insurgents that had just pucked Jafar off the side of the road, went in there and beat him up. They were going to do something to him, probably to get to MK, but they went in there, shot him up, and he walked out like it was nothing. And like, that's a story, like 100% the truth, because like, there's like countless witnesses, and he just, because you hear gunfire and you're like, MK, what was the shooting today? He's like, that was me. I'm like, whoa, back it up. What do you mean that was you? Someone had taken Jafar. I get on this. I say this. I go and I shoot. No problem, right? I'm like, okay, I got to stop saying bullets are better than reports. You know? I'm like, this isn't good.
But literally, he just like, come on, Jafar, let's go home.
Jafar, I mean, I had met Jafar, so I mean, I knew they were tight. And Jafar was like this, and MK was, I mean, he was like Tom Selleck. He was like 6'3", just this huge guy. Probably one of the most unique human beings I'd ever met in like wartime.
Okay, before we move on, do you have any other MK stories? Anything else that's necessary to share about MK?
I mean, I think that's aside from his love of whiskey. I mean, he's just whiskey and cigarettes. He was a good man. He was definitely a thug, but he did, for all the nefarious and like shit that he did, he saved a lot of Marines' lives, because he was the first one to be like, I'll tell you where weapons cache is. I'm like, perfect, man. So we go get the cache. He's like, may I have the guns? I'm like, absolutely. And the reason why is, he goes, we only have 5 guns in our police. So he's like, here's the serials. May we have them? We'll keep records of them. Like, absolutely. So he was very much wanting to keep the peace, but it was kind of at his law.
That's an interesting alignment. It's like you find out like a hacker is hacking like the government, and the government hires him.
Yeah.
And he's like, yeah, I'll work for you guys, but also like anything I hack, I get to keep. And you're like, all right, like you're helping us. Like, we need the info, we need the help.
Exactly. He was good like that. He was very good. He had his finger on the pulse in the Ville, and I can tell you, he did a lot of good keeping Marines safe, keeping civilians safe. But I think he really just sent a message like, if you're not Kabuli and you come in here and start some problems,
it's gonna be some shit for you.
It's game over, dude.
I mean, he lived a real life version of when you did like the terrorist training.
Exactly.
He was real life version of that.
He was real life version. But he was a huge value, because we kind of knew underneath his watch there was not a lot of things, like crazy things, that were going to happen. There was going to be no big attacks. There was going to be there'd be small, you know, like you got to think about even that his one other cousins, brothers, sisters, whatever, that was murdered. Like, that's a little bit different. That's a crime of passion. And then his cousin, and then someone trying to kill him. Like, those are all kind of one-offs, but not huge, like terrorist, insurgent sort of kinetic operations, complex attacks. Like, it wouldn't happen. Like, and I know for a fact he probably had tons of weapons and things cached, but like, when your name is Muj Killer and you earned it because you were once an insurgent, a legitimate fighter, join the positive side, the police side, and then turn around and went and killed all your old buddies because you knew where they were and it was going to help move you up in the ranks. Like, you function a little bit differently.
Yeah, guy's a little bit of psycho.
A little bit differently.
Wow. How'd you say bye to him? What was the final time you spoke to him?
Man, this was 2006. I think we cracked a bottle of Jack Daniels, and we just sat and sipped on some Jack Daniels, smoked some cigarettes. I think, I can't remember the exact amount of money, but like, at a certain point, he was kind of being reimbursed for his efforts. So I gave him like a huge bonus at the end and handed him over to somebody else who was going to wind up, taking my place because there's rotations. And then I think, if I recall correctly, he just pizzled out with the guy that I had, because I think he was too much by the...
Wow.
Like, you have to report to me? He's like, fuck off.
Yeah. What about the whole bullets reports thing? Yeah. Can I have that back?
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
Because he called me Nakib Don, and he's like, me and Nakib Don, we do good.
We have an agreement.
Yeah. Hugs, kisses on the cheeks. Okay, my friend. It was good.
Your favorite lunatic?
Oh, by far. By far. He made life very, very easy, and
wow.
Kept Marines alive, man. Like, I tell people, I'm like, my one job was to land overseas, and if 100, 200 Marines got off that plane, was to make sure another 100 or 200 got back on that plane.
Yeah.
So like,
and if MK helped you do it, it's like,
that's it, man. Thugs get hugs. And that's like a lot of us counter intel guys, those 0211 guys, that's kind of was our mental focus when, you know, dealing with different assets was like, we're here to keep Marines alive. We're here to keep the civilian population alive. And like, sometimes you have to go to different lengths to make it happen.
I've heard of this, I forget exactly what it's called. I think it's the third traveler. It's a phenomena that happens. I don't know if that's what it's called. Someone fact check it. It's this phenomena where basically someone will be on like a long solo journey, and after a couple days, they start to get the sense that there's someone else with them. That there's kind of like a spiritual component that, you know, there's a force that's alongside them on the trek.
Okay.
And it might be, you know, some people believe it to be truly spiritual, where they say like, you know, it's a guardian angel that's with me. Okay. It's whatever religion they subscribe to. Other people think it's just like a feature of being alone for prolonged periods of time. Have you ever experienced that, and what do you think that is?
So I can't say I've experienced like any sort of physical manifestation, but I do feel like when I am in the bush on some of these long adventures, there's like a force, an entity that could exist and possibly does exist out there that's with me, in not one of guidance, but one of like reassurance, in the form of like, no matter what possibly could go wrong, it can never be the end. Meaning like, this isn't where you're supposed to die. Like, everyone fears death in various forms, and it's the one guarantee we all have in life, no matter what. But this isn't the place for it. Like, it's a reassurance that nothing out here is going to kill you. You're going to die, nothing like that. So I think it kind of gives you like a sense of like, not invincibility, but like trust. And I always say nature is the most honest, truthful. It will never lie, cheat, or steal. What it is what it is. There's no facade about it.
Perfect consistency.
It's perfect. It's flawless in every way. So what it is, if you see rain clouds coming, it's gonna rain. You know, it's like, it's not there to fool you. So there's like a trust there. And I think in that trust and that kind of like entity that also exists, it's like, we've got your back. This isn't your time. This isn't your place. This is the place you love. You know, this is where you want to be. And we're not going to kind of like take that from you. And I say we're this, you know, it's hard to kind of break it down, but something exists in a form out there, whether it's just, again, that kind of pattern of life. Like once you fully immerse yourself into it, and you know, when the birds are chirping up in that tree, you know, everything's hunky-dory. And then when they stop, you're like, something's moving in the vicinity of that area.
It's all connected. It's all working together.
You kind of feel it in every kind of essence. I mean, you sleep next to enough fires and enough grass beds covered up in an elk hide, or in a snow cave, or next to a waterfall. There is like something there that kind of like brings you in line with that whole pattern of life. It's just like, you can breathe with it, you can smell it, you can taste it.
This cosmic connectedness is what a lot of, you know, new age people would say.
Yeah, you could call it that.
Do you feel that though? Like, do you believe in God, or do you believe in some type of source, like some type of creative energy? You've kind of alluded to it, but I'm curious.
Yeah,
like,
I think,
did you become more spiritual as you were spending time in nature?
No. I'm not the most religious person.
Mm-hmm.
There is likely something, but I don't know what it is, and I don't think maybe I'll ever know what it is.
Mm-hmm.
I just know that there's times where there's kind of a different essence in what it is that I'm kind of feeling in a natural environment. It hasn't revealed itself to me. I think I've exposed myself to it, but I haven't gone in that way. Like, I don't do psychedelics in the form where like I'm going into like another dimension. I think some of that might be suggestive preemptively, like in certain ways. As far as like a god or multiple gods, I don't know. I haven't really, like, I was brought up Catholic, Roman Catholic, but I think I've seen too many things in kind of my travels and my time in the military to question a lot of things, but know there's still a virtuous kind of spirit or entity that could be guiding us in various forms. But I don't know what I would call it. And I don't know if it would want to be called something by a low-level little human being like me, you know? I mean,
Right.
it's hard to say. I mean, do I think there's aliens? Sure, why not? But do I think that they planted us here? No, I don't. Do I think they're Sasquatch? Well, shoot it, bag it, tag it, put it in front of me, then we'll discuss. Like, there's a lot of things that you can believe in, but I'm kind of like a seeing is believing. But then, like, I can see with my eyes and my mind, but I can also kind of like see with my heart as well. Like, I know when I see my kids, there is an unconditional love there that it's sometimes hard to put into words and hard to put in actions. But I know just by seeing them, like, there is something that radiates inside of me. When I see my girlfriend, when I see my dogs, my parents, my family, it's like there is something there. But I almost don't want to put a label on it or try to describe it because I know it exists, but there's no need to like provide those details because it's just mine.
Yeah, the label could be it could pigeonhole it. It could kind of minimize it.
Yeah, it starts to put it in a box.
Yeah. It's God. So therefore, it's this guy in the clouds. It looks like you.
Yeah,
or like
exactly.
it's the this thing it's like I don't know what it is, but for you, it's personal. You can have it. You can feel it. Mm-hmm. And so what's the point in putting a word on it that other people, just to explain it to other people? You don't need to explain it to me. You don't need to explain it to anyone. It could just be yours.
That's it. It kind of comes, there was this one time. So like we discussed, when I was 37, I had a heart attack, a massive heart attack known as the Widowmaker heart attack. I had a 99% blockage in my left anterior descending artery, and it kills 99% of the people. Now,
99%.
99%. Yeah. So I was the 1%, right?
Wow.
Go figure. But
And how did it come on? Can you describe the experience?
It was just it was kind of a genetics thing. So I had just returned back from Alaska from teaching on the Fairbanks Anchorage area, so between them both. And I returned back to Colorado, and my day kind of consisted of going to my son's spelling bee, kind of like normal kind of routines. At that time, I was training for a super jungle ultra marathon, like 245K down in Peru. So I was 6 months into this training cycle, and I was fit, working out, always out in the mountains. Not the biggest drinker, eat relatively healthy. I was a vegan on a dare for like 2 years because my buddy dared me.
2 years?
Yeah, it was kind of a weird thing, but yeah. I mean, I wasn't a vegan at that time, but that's another story. But yeah, so I was really healthy. I went out for a run that day. Started to kind of feel like a burning in the chest, and I was like, I'm okay. 10,000 men die every year from stupidity because we don't listen to our bodies, and I was going to be one of them. So I had a slight burning. I was like, wow, it's probably because you're down in a lower elevation in Alaska. You're back up in Colorado, 8,000 feet. You got to get used to it. Okay. So I kind of went through the whole day and kind of had these sudden little bursts of this burning sensation. That night, as most fathers do with their young kids, they wrestle and kind of roughhouse and then put them to bed, went upstairs, laid down, and probably like 2 hours later, I just woke up. And I used this descriptor as I felt like Satan took a dump on my chest, and something was burning a hole in my chest. Now, most people have had heart attacks. They feel a tightness in their left arm. Their jaws will kind of lock, a lot of pain in the lower back. I had none of those symptoms. I just had Satan took a hot one on my chest. But I knew that was something that wasn't right. Like, I've broken my ankles, falling out of helos, fingers, snapped this. Like, I know what my tolerance is. More importantly, I'm familiar with that pain as it comes. This was something totally foreign. Got myself to the hospital, walked in, and they started doing these tests. One of the tests is where they test your troponins, which is an indicator in the blood that you've had some sort of cardiac-related event. They tested mine. They're like, we definitely know you had a heart attack. And I'm like, look, I'm going to be honest with you. 37 years old. I've delivered babies. I've patched bullet holes. I didn't have a heart attack. The doc looks at me and says, look, I'm 65. I've been doing this for 50 years. Not 50 years, but like 40 years. You had a heart attack. I'm like, all right, you win. You got me on this one. So they rushed me into this emergency room. They stuck a tube in my arm and then put a stent in my heart. And then I woke up a couple hours later and they're like, you had a heart attack. Your life has changed. Everything you used to do, you're not going to be able to do. You're going to have to take life slowly. You're going to be on these meds for the rest of your life. Just this whole flood of everything you once were doing. It's completely gone. So I was like, what the heck? So
That's brutal.
Yeah, it was totally brutal. Especially, you know, at 37, they're like, it's genetics. Does your family have a history? And I'm like, well, you know, we have some heart related issues in the family. Like, you know, you're going to be on these 8 meds. And I'm like, holy cow. I'm like, I don't want to do this sort of stuff. So, you know, after laying in the hospital that very first night, there was a nurse that was always having to come in and kind of check my readings. And this night, this kind of goes into that spiritual thing. That night, a nurse woke me up. And I actually write about this in my first book. And this lady, she came in and she checked my levels. And she's like, you know, you're pretty lucky. And I'm like, well, you know, I think it was maybe some of the things that I, you know, was doing in my life before, being physically fit and healthy. She goes, you should, you know, take this as a message. You know, you should help people. You should educate people. You should kind of expose yourself to the world because you are young. You did lead a very, very healthy life. Think about all those people. And she kind of just spoke to me in a very kind of normal way. And it was a good like bonding moment. Before you know it, I fell back asleep. And I woke up the next morning and I was expecting to see her, and it was another nurse. And I'm like, hey, what happened to the nurse last night? I had a really great conversation with her. She's like, I've been here the whole night. And I was like, no. There was a nurse that came in here last night. We talked about this. We had this. She took my levels. Like everything was good. She just gave me some sound advice. Like she looked like this. I can't remember her name. She's like, Mr. Dust, I've been here all night. As a matter of fact, this is my last check before shift change. And I was like, what? There's no way. I'm like, I remember talking to her about these things and like, don't be shy in the world and you know, educate people and help people, all these different things. And she's like, I'm sorry, Mr. Dust. Like I've been here the whole night. She's like, I checked you at all the times you can see on the clipboard. And I was like, okay. I'm like, so it was kind of confusing to me. And then I woke, you know, my ex up at the time, and I was like, did somebody else come in here? Do you have a friend come in here? She's like, no. And I'm like, what the heck? So I'm not a very spiritual person. I don't know what happened, but I had a conversation with someone that was a nurse that gave me like the most sound advice in my days moving forward, which like resulted in like me going on social media, me reaching out to people, me trying to establish friends. Cause I was a very private person. I was teaching classes. I was doing a lot of things, but I kept to myself. I had a circle of probably 2 people, like, and it was one of those things where like you need to kind of come alive in the world. People can learn from you. And I kind of took that message where I had, you know, people that I knew that smoked cigarettes, were overweight, did nothing active. And I'm like, if it can happen to me, it can definitely happen to you. And she used the phrase like, you can be the example. And I would use it. I'm like, let me be your example. Like if it can happen to me, it can happen to you. You know, Marine veteran, training for a jungle ultra marathon, living a very healthy life, all these different things. And it happened, you know? So I kind of still remember that when I captured it in my first book called Scavenger, that was kind of my approach moving forward. Whereas ancient peoples, we were scavengers. We would take what we could, dead, dying, decaying things. We would scavenge ant mounds. We would scavenge carcasses. We would scavenge anything we could for our sustenance going forward. And I kind of took on this approach where I can scavenge things from my past that I know were 100% good. And then I can scavenge and collect and kind of take these things from various people and cultures and best practices and apply those to my recovery, my heart recovery going forward, and capture it all. And that was kind of like my approach. You have to be a scavenger in the purest form in all the days going forward. And in the days going forward, like, you know, when I was tired, I would sleep. I stopped living the mindset of everybody else is important. I kind of, for the first time in my life, kind of said, all of you, it's now about me. It seems like a very selfish thing to do as a father and as a husband at the time, but I had to focus on me and my own personal recovery as far as, just the days going forward. Because when I walked out of that hospital, I could barely walk out of that hospital. A couple of days later, I could barely make it around the block. Like having a heart attack was like almost starting at square one in a physical sense. It was just something like most people will never experience, but it was something that I was like, okay, you're okay starting at square one. You've started at square one many times in your life. This is just another, restart, if you will. So I just, scavenged those things from my past, scavenged things from different folks, and applied it to my recovery. And before you know it, I found myself living in caves out in the mountains for long periods of time, saying the only way to heal, and I know this to be 100% true, is to heal in the purest and most naturalist form in the world, and that's the natural environment. Again, I won't lie, cheat, steal, do anything nefarious to you. It is what it is. It will provide you water. It will provide you warmth. It will provide you everything that you need, and that's where you're going to go and heal. And walked out there with animal clothes, and for a duration of 6 months, I was in caves, I had a series of 9 caves. All these caves provided different things, and I would walk in between those caves, and I would return back home for a little bit, spend some time with my boys, do some dad things, because I was a huge driver and a motivator, and then filter back out in the woods. It'd be blizzards and snowstorms, and I'd be, huddled up in this snow cave and just healing. And you know what a moleskin book is? Yeah. So I brought a moleskin and just started writing, what I was doing, like eating wild foods and grounding and like sleeping when I wanted to sleep. Like just doing all these different things that I knew we all had in us, but I was really focusing on those and really just kind of saying, this is your ultimate form of recovery.
Wow. Did you take any pharmaceuticals?
I did. So when I was out there, I took the heart meds. And then after a while, I'm like, this is not the path that I want to go on. So then I just dove into the most holistic way of keeping your heart super, super healthy. And now I just take all natural supplements like hawthorn berry and fenugreek and these different things. And my blood pressure is good to go. And, I still have the occasional libation. But it was all about finding an opportunity and the best way to recover. And kind of listening to the lady that spoke to me that night, I wanted to capture it in a book. And my idea with the book was to just give 100 pages. It's not a long book. I know somebody can sit down and read that book in one sitting. Sometimes people will look at a book 400 or 500 pages like, oh shit, this is going to take me months. 100 pages, one day, maybe 2 days. And it's the bluffs, bottom line up front, this. I'll tell my story. These are the things that I did. Now you take this and apply it to your life. Scavenge the pieces from this book, apply it to your life. Give it to somebody else. Read it, pass it on, because it could potentially save someone's life. Because we can see a lot of the exterior, but it's always the interior that can kind of always take the biggest damage. So.
Wow. Were your doctors impressed by your recovery?
Eventually I got rid of my doctors. Yeah, because they were telling me all the things they would tell like a 75, 85-year-old man.
Yeah, take it easy. Yeah. Stay home. Don't work out.
You can't eat meat. You can't do this. You can't do that. And I was like, no. I'm like,
these things are going to kill me if I do what you say.
If I just sit around, I'm gonna eventually die.
Wow.
So, in all of it, I started experimenting with different things. A lot of fasting. Fasting is a very important thing. And I experienced my first fastings in the Middle East during that Ramadan cycle. But I started doing a lot of fasting. I started eating a lot of meat, all clean foods.
And then as far as if someone was interested in doing, going camping, right? Like, there's so many people in New York I talked to. Like I grew up, I went camping a lot. I loved camping. I went camping with my family. We would go to Utah. We went out on the Green River. And then even just like upstate New York, like I love like motorcycle camping. So like getting
That's
on my
awesome.
bike, riding out like upstate for 2 hours. We'll go to like PA.
Cool.
And then just find like a little campground, find like just kind of a place out in the woods and see if it's illegal to camp there and see what the deal is. And then just set up a tent, me and a couple buddies will just hang out. It's like the best.
Yeah.
But I grew up kind of doing that. So it's a little bit easier for me to be like, okay, I need, you know, this little foam pad. I need this type of sleeping bag. It needs to be this rated for this cold, this type of tent. If someone has no idea how to get out in nature, how do they do that?
Yeah, I think in this day and age, I mean, there's lots of information sources, and that's, you know, not to plug my book, but that is the whole premise of my third book, Wild Wisdom, is for that person, someone who has no background in the outdoors. It is kind of the necessary, these are the knowledge, skills, and abilities associated with it. It's not hard to go into the woods. I think a lot of people fear a lot of different things that could go wrong in the woods. And I'll tell you, like 99% of the time, those things don't go wrong. Just go. Like, just pick a spot on the map, like be led by curiosity, find a weird, obscure state park somewhere and just go there and just experience it. Even if it's 50 acres, but it could have something very unique there. Just go. Start with small trips. Start with
like day hikes?
Yeah, like a day hike. Pack whatever you need. Whatever you think you'll need for that hour in the bush, pack what you need. And just start increasing it from there. Increase it into the point of where it's like, all right, we're going to go for one day, and then we're going to do a second day, but this night we're going to stay in a hotel. And then maybe 3 weeks later, you're like, we're going to do it again, or now we're going to camp in our car. Maybe the next time after that, you camp in a tent. Have a slow progression. Like, it doesn't have to be like something I do where it's like, now I'm going to start skinning animals, making my own clothes, and going to live in a cave with stone tools. It comes in time if that's your path. But just start small. Go on some hikes. Go see some things that are genuinely interesting in the bush, whether it's a waterfall, a cool cave, mineral beds, lava flows, lava tubes. There's so many unique things out there that, I mean, you could get lost in it for just hours. I mean, as someone who builds stone tools, my head is always fixed to the ground when I'm in various areas because I'm always looking for something, whether it's an indicator that somebody was once sitting here and popped a flake off. I'm like, somebody within the past 10,000, 15,000, 20,000 years stood right here and crafted a stone tool. And now I'm sharing that ground with them. I am now part of the history of this little piece of land. Like, what did they need? What were they doing? What was their mindset then? What is my mindset now?
That's so cool. That's something I think I heard you talk about where you said, I love looking at like old arrowheads or old like weapons because you know how the guy felt when he was making it.
Absolutely.
That you can look at like kind of like just like an old piece of flint or something and be like, oh, this guy was pissed off.
Yeah.
Because that shit broke the wrong way.
Yes.
Can you talk on that?
Yeah. So, I mean, every piece of stone has a story, and especially when it comes to flint knapping or lithic reduction, the stone has certain indicators on it based on how you hit the stone, how you approach the stone, and you prepare different things on it that if I drive a flake and it hinges.
Sorry, you got to describe. What is a flake? What is hinging?
Sorry. Yeah. So flint knapping is utilizing a high silicate base stone, and silicate is a microcrystalline, something that is very smooth. And the ideal stones to flint knap is stones that are waxy, glassy, smooth, and featureless. So when we think of something like obsidian is essentially a volcanic glass. We think of something like a flint or a chert, that is a stone, but it's a high silicate stone. So when it breaks almost like glass. And through that breaking of glass, you can predict, more importantly, orchestrate how you remove a single stone flake, which is, you know, something as thin as a baseball card or a deck of playing cards to a floor tile. You can remove pieces of stone off of it to reduce it down through repetitive strikes to shape it into a spearhead, an axe, a knife. So
you get a big piece of obsidian that you find out in the woods or something.
Volcanic flow.
And then you take a rock. And you crack it against the side of it.
Exactly.
And then you'll basically break off a small little piece.
Small little slivers.
And it'll be like a little sliver. Maybe it looks like a circle or a square, whatever breaks off. And then what?
Then you can take that single flake, and in the purest form, that is a knife. That is the most simplest of cutting tools that you could use. So you can take that one single flake, use it as a knife to open up an animal, to process cordage and cut plant fibers, or you could take that flake and through another process called pressure flaking, you can remove microflakes off of it. By putting pressure into the edge and popping flakes off, you can then shape it into an arrow point. Now, the whole aspect of flint knapping is probably one of the hardest traditional skills to learn because it takes a lot of time, a lot of stitches, and a lot of rock. But it's one of those things with enough time and practice, you can become proficient at it where every strike is with intent and purpose. It's just not hitting the rock. It's hitting a rock at a certain angle. And have you ever shot a BB gun at a windshield?
Yeah.
It creates what's called a Hertzian cone. It's a 90-degree cone that when something with a high silicate rate like obsidian or a chert will create a 90-degree cone. Now, if I take a piece of stone, and let's say that stone is like the size of a T-bone steak, same thickness, same diameter, I can hit that stone at a certain angle and create a Hertzian cone at different degrees. So if I hit it more straight on, I'm going to get a 90-degree cone. If I hit it more at a side angle, I can create a 40-degree slice right out of the stone. And I keep rotating the stone and flipping the stone until I hit it enough times where I reduce the stone down into a large piece of, T-bone steak, if you will, to a very, very thin piece of like flank steak where now it's bifacial. It's two faces.
And you've also cut off 20 flakes or something like that.
20, maybe even 100 plus flakes. And all of those flakes in the simplest form are knives, or those flakes can be then turned into arrow points or spear points. So there's a whole process by creating and repeating the strikes, producing that Hertzian cone. And from that, you ultimately produce a tool.
Wow. And the angle of that Hertzian cone will create different types of tools?
Yes and no. So the angle allows me to reduce the stone. And if I increase the angle, I can reduce more stone, creating a harder edge that I could use as like an axe head.
To the main piece of obsidian.
To the main chunk of stone.
Got it.
So there's quite a few steps in it. But ultimately, it is the one factor that attributed to our success as a species, as a human being, as early hominids. I mean, you go to the Olduvai Gorge, like when I was in Africa, I was 86 miles from the Olduvai Gorge, and I was sitting making Oldowan tools, which are the oldest stone tools that were ever created of flakes, choppers, scrapers, and smashers and cleavers, just real simple tools. But those tools evolved into being able to make a stone drill bit where I can pump a stone drill into wood, make a hole, where I can use a burn and carve out bone, where I can make any number of things with stone tools. And when you think about it, we've used stone longer than we've used steel.
Right. Yeah, the Stone Age, right?
Yeah. Paleolithic, Mesolithic, Neolithic.
Which is so funny because you use the Stone Age as like a derogatory term.
Yeah.
Like, oh yeah, those people, they're in the Stone Age. The thing is, I'm not in the Stone Age. I don't know how to make a knife.
Yeah.
So it's like, we can make fun of these people that are in the Stone Age or like make fun of people back in the day using stone tools. It's like, I don't know how to do that.
Yeah.
And it's wild to me that I'm existing as a human being, and this piece of technology that basically got us to this point, I'm completely oblivious to how to use.
It's completely lost. I mean, there's a small handful of knappers like myself that still carry on with that kind of tradition. Some people like to make things and like put them in cases and, put them up on their wall, which is totally fine. I'm a type of napper that likes to build the tools that I then go use out in the bush.
And break them,
reshape them, make them again, and truly live that experience of sustaining an environment with the simplest form of tools you could possibly come up with. And when you do that, you gain a whole new level of appreciation for all the modern amenities. So like being able to use a steel knife to carve something is awesome. Take it away, and now use a stone knife. It's a whole different set of like fine motor skills to craft something with a stone blade. But then you build up an appreciation for that stone or for that steel blade like you couldn't possibly imagine, because it saves time and effort and a lot of energy. But with the stone, there isn't anything you can't create with it that you wouldn't absolutely need out in the bush. So for me, in that flint knapping process, which is something I teach to people all around the world, is you can pretty much do everything survival wise, even transitioning into that thrive phase with stone tools.
Wow.
And it's like probably my most creative and favorite process to experience. I flint knap every day, like every single, like if there's that 10,000 hour rule, I think I'm well above the 10,000 hour rule. I mean, the greatest thing about like social media is people challenge me in different ways to make things.
Yeah, that's cool.
And I enjoy it because now they're giving me a whole different aspect of challenge, which is something that I'm like, all right, I can make a crown, but I can make a Chinese star or an axe,
Things you wouldn't have thought of.
Never would have thought of.
Oh, that's cool.
And it's pretty amazing. But, some of the things that by having this very unique, approach into stone tools and living like a modern day hunter gatherer at times is there's a lot of colleges and universities that reach out because, a lot of their professors and a lot of the things that they do, they don't have the ground truth in it. They have never, they'll study the stone tools in a
learned
picture.
It in a
book, but they've never actually known of someone to go out on foot in a loincloth with an atlatl and stone points and try and kill wild hogs or take down a bison or take down deer. They don't know what that real ground truth is. So even on my next bison experiment, where I have a group of people coming out, we're going to craft a whole manner of stone tools and then completely take apart a North American bison with stone tools. There's a couple archaeologists that have signed up for the class because they're like, we find stuff out in the field that we believe to be butchering tools. We'll do some edge and wear analysis, and we'll get the results that it was likely a butchering tool. But now we can actually replicate that entire process in this class and then have the ancient tools and then the tools that they've created and do a comparative analysis and say the probability and the reasonability of why this wear is so prevalent on this stone tool is because they were trying to cut the meat off of a thick leg bone, and they've just replicated that.
Or they were hacking a tree or whatever the thing is that they were using it for.
Exactly.
Oh, interesting.
So it's a world that like I never thought I would go down, but I'm so pleased that I did because it's given me, so many opportunities where I'm just like, man, I'm just a dude in a workshop that breaks stone and then goes into the bush. But
so cool.
Yeah, man, it works out.
What's the most challenging tool to make?
Challenging tools are long tools that are thin. So think of like, a really long blade, because you got to keep in mind when you're hitting a piece of stone, you're striking it with a significant amount of force, and shock waves will travel through stone. And if it doesn't have a spot to travel to, it will snap. So you actually have to take that stone, place it up against like the inside portion of your thigh or in the back of your hand, or you kind of cradle it and strike it so the shock wave travels into your arm and then dissipates. If you can craft something, let's say it's 8 inches, 9 inches, and you hold it wrong once and hit it, it could snap.
Boom. So every hit has to be precise.
Every hit is precise.
Be intentional.
Intentional.
Wow.
And like when you think about like ancient cultures that employed a lot of stone, the level of mastery, the level of like forward thinking is something a lot of people don't give, people of the Paleolithic, the Lithic ages, a lot of credit for, because they were able to create these super thin, baseball card thin tools and spearheads that when thrown into an animal would go, you take like an American bison, you can throw an atlatl through one side and have it travel all the way through the other because that projectile is so sharp.
Really?
It just travels through, lacerates everything.
Like a bullet. Like
a bullet.
Sometimes bullets don't even go through. They'll break apart.
Exactly. And so a couple of the bison experiments that I've done with CU Boulder is, so there's a weapon system called the atlatl. And an atlatl is essentially an extension of your arm. It's a long paddle, if you will. It's got a handle, a long shaft, and there's a spur or a little hook at the end. And you take a 6 to maybe 8 foot dart and you connect it through a little cup at the very back. And essentially it gives you mechanical advantage by almost creating like a whip-like motion, but almost gives you another forearm and hand, if you will.
Oh, wow.
So from that,
Send me a picture of that. I'll include it right here. That way people can see it.
Absolutely. And from that, you can actually take a 6 or 7 foot long arrow. So we have this arrow here, make it 7 feet, and then you can throw it 100, 150 yards. And when you throw it, it has enough kinetic energy to not only pierce the animal, but actually drive the entire 7 feet through that animal.
No way.
And some of the
You've seen that?
Yeah, I've done it. Some of the experiments we do is we'll take a number of stone projectile points and put them on an atlatl and then throw them into a bison, testing the kinetic energy, the penetration, the wound, just everything you could possibly think of. And then from those throws, you'll get pieces that break, you'll get pieces that will slice all the way through, and then they can use those as a comparative to ancient stone points. So stone points break in a number of ways when they impact different portions of an animal. So when you find a break on an archaeological dig, and the break is very irregular, and if you think of like a slice of pizza, that's how it looks, and then there's a huge chunk taken out of the side of it, well, it's very likely it hit a rib bone when it was traveling in. And if you can produce that in a current day experiment, you can then say, all right, I'm producing it here. It's very likely this is how this appeared here. This person was throwing it at an animal, hit an animal. More than likely, this projectile broke inside the animal. Wow. They were butchering out the animal, and the projectile laid in place as they carried out the meat.
And this is significant because you can look at the tools of a culture, and you can look at the blades and things like that, because this is made of wood. The wood will go away. The feathers might kind of go away, but the blades will stay intact.
Absolutely.
And if you don't know exactly what the blades are for, it's hard to deduce exactly what kind of culture it was. But if you're able to say like, oh, this has this type of divot cut out of it that typically would only come because it was used for hunting, then now all of a sudden oh, they were hunting with these types of means. And then that gives you so much more of a look into the culture that you're actually studying.
Absolutely, yeah. So there's the physical evidence that's left behind. A lot of the assertions that we make derive from those stone projectile points, stone tools, burns, drills, things to that extent. The downside is that with the stone, we also place a lot of unknowns onto a culture. So we'll never be able to really tell, how they loved one another, their different practices day to day. We can only really derive those sort of assessments from the stone tools, as well as the midden that they left behind, like the remnants, broken pots.
There's art, something like that.
Art. It's a lot of the physical things. So we have, artifacts, and we have like geo artifacts, like an ancient fire pit would be something that would be indicative of what they were cooking in their fire. Were they sitting around the fire? Were they processing grains? Because you can find different things in different regions that are indicative of practices. Wow. So this is hunting practice, cooking practice, sheltering practice, but the true culture isn't 100% known.
Yeah, of course.
But
it can never really be known without a written record, I guess.
Exactly.
But that atlatl is crazy. It's like a trebuchet, I guess. Like you're like creating this force, and it's adding a secondary whip that's launching the thing.
And all the darts are flexible. So I'll send you some. I have some slow motion throws where you can see this dart. You remember Revenge of the Nerds? When Lamar's throwing the javelin? That's exactly how it looks. So when you take a huge point, let's say it's 7 inches, it's razor sharp on all the sides, and it makes entry into an animal, and it just slices and dices with all that kinetic energy, and it creates a huge wound cavity. Shooting an animal with a stone projectile point is going to lead to a quicker kill than using a broadhead on a modern arrow.
Wow.
A lot of hunters these days, they'll shoot an arrow out of a compound bow, and they'll drive that arrow straight through the animal, which is really the worst practice. The reason being is, as an arrow travels through, it creates a wound cavity, and if it slices and dices, and there's different types of wounds. You have crushes, abrasions, lacerations, incisions, and punctures. A incision is a clean slice. So it's going to slice through that animal, make its wound cavity, and most of the time they exit out the other side. And when you hear a hunter say, I had to track this animal for a day and a half or for 5 hours, it's because they shot it, they got a kill shot, but that wound closes relatively quick. On a stone projectile, you get a laceration. And a laceration is a jagged edge cut. And when you stick a stone arrow point inside of an animal, and then that animal kicks up and moves, that stone point is just in there lacerating vitals, the whole thoracic cavity, not the entire thoracic cavity, but wherever they hit. And that's going to lead to a much quicker bleed out.
Oh, interesting.
So you get
the animal will die quicker, ends their suffering quicker.
Exactly.
You're able to, eat the meat or whatever else you're going to do with it. Wow.
Yeah, because there's no such thing as an ethical kill. The only thing that exists is a quick kill. How quick something can die.
Wow.
I mean, I've cut porcupines out of trees and then clubbed them to death to get a meal, suffocating a goat, shooting elk with a bow. It's how quick something can actually expire, because there's no such thing as ethical killing. It's
wow.
Like,
Yeah, no, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So hypothetically, let's say you could see the future and you knew that I was going to get stuck in the woods.
Okay.
Let's say I'm there for like 2 weeks.
2 weeks, right on. It's a good time.
I'm going to be there for 2 weeks.
All right.
Or let's say I don't know, take your pick, upstate New York, something like that.
Right on.
And I'm like 100 miles away from anything.
Okay.
2 weeks in the wilderness. What do I do to survive?
Shelter. Shelter is number one.
Take me through all the steps.
Yeah.
Day 1, what do I need to do? Day 2 and 3, take me through.
Number one, shelter is going to be the most important. Priority number one, you're there. Day 1, you realize you're lost. You're going to be there for 2 weeks. You will die from exposure quicker than anything else. From the heat, from the wind, from the rain, from temperatures. A form of shelter will give you an extra layer of protection. It will block the wind. It will block the sun. So building your shelter is probably the most important thing. Shelters can come in a free form, like a cave, a rock overhang, a fallen log, or it requires you to do some fabrication to it. You have to build something. When it comes to like actually creating the shelter, it's going to boil down to the tools you have. Do you have an axe? Do you have a knife? Let's say if you have absolutely nothing, plenty of deadfall. There's plenty of opportunities for you to collect things that are free. They're already cut down. It's a quick pull of the grass that you can collect those up and give yourself a layer of protection. I use the analogy towers. So time, others, weather, equipment, resources, and safety. Those are the factors that you need to kind of overlay your shelter building process. So you're going to be out there for 2 weeks. You get dropped off at midday. You have maybe 5-6 hours before the lights actually go out. So you have 6 hours to build a shelter. Who's out there with me? Others. If it's just you, well, that shelter might take a little bit longer because there isn't a division of labor, so to speak. What kind of weather do you have? Is this in the winter? Is this in the summer? You need to factor those sort of things into your shelter building. Equipment. Do you have axes and knives? If you have nothing, you got to go the free route. I always use the example of, I did a TV show where I lived in a swamp in Louisiana for 30 days with no tools. It was the most exciting thing. The only thing they gave us was one dead wild hog. And it was awesome. I'm like, no tools in the worst place, like in the middle of a swamp. This is great. I'm stoked. You would think, in my mind, I would love to find some stone, but there's no stone in a swamp. So we're out there, and it's me and this other guy, and eventually we're using bamboo or river cane. River cane has a silicate on the outside, and when you break it, you can slice open anything. It's razor sharp. It's a knife, yeah. Super sharp. You're going to cut yourself. But we were able to open up that hog, start pulling out the prime cuts of meat. I did a hand drill friction fire, created enough smoke where we started smoking all the hog meat. Now, as the days progress, we're eating hog meat. We've got plenty of hog jerky, and we need to build a shelter. So,
where'd you sleep the first night? Just on the ground?
Just on the ground.
Thug it out.
Yeah, next to the fire. Just on some palm leaves and just, it's a good night.
You could do that for a night or two.
You could do it. You could do it until you start to see weather coming. And this was like a November timeframe. So there was tropical storms, which we wound up getting caught into. So scenario is you're out in the middle of a swamp. You have no cutting tools. How do you cut a tree down?
I mean, do you make a cutting? I mean, there's nothing really to make it with. Like,
there's nothing harder than the wood.
Okay, let me think. How do you cut a tree down? I'm like, you could maybe dig around it because like the swamp trees, like sometimes like they got like shallow root systems, like they're kind of wide, they're not that deep. Like you maybe dig around, you could pull something down. I don't know.
You burn it down. So this isn't my idea. This is what a lot of the Creole Indians and native cultures used to do in these areas. Is they would take clay, They'd find a good tree, a nice, piece of hickory or oak, maybe 7-8 inches in diameter, nice and healthy, and they'd pack clay around the base of it, about a foot off the ground, and then light a fire right underneath it and burn the tree over.
Wow.
Nature provides all. Already built a fire with a hand drill. That's your cutting tool. So there's a lot of things that you can do to build that perfect shelter, but that towers, that equipment, and then safety and all those sort of things, those are going to be the factors that when you're up in upstate New York for 2 weeks, you're going to have to consider in actually building yours.
Wow. So you can burn down the tree. It kind of like burns the little root system, burns the whole bottom part, and then it just tips over. You put out the fire, and now
you take that fire, bring it over to another tree, burn down your next tree. If you're going to build some sort of elevated platform, So when I was in Iceland, living on an Icelandic fjord up in the northern section, there's no trees, but there's a lot of turf. And the other thing that there is, Russia has sent lots of driftwood into those fjords, and there's nothing but driftwood. So there's free wood and turf. You build a giant turf house.
What do you mean turf?
So like, remember like the American West, the sod busters? It's like sod bricks.
Okay.
Well, in Iceland, in certain northern kind of taiga forests and areas to the north, there's a layer of turf. You can almost peel it like it's sod right off the ground.
Really?
In these huge sheets as wide as this table, and then lay it over beams, and you create a turf house.
So you get some driftwood, you can kind of make a little skeleton of a house, and then you take the turf, rip it up, lay it down, and you got a nice little shelter.
Yep. Build a fire pit in there. You catch puffins from a cliff, smoke the puffin meat, build beds and chairs, collect seaweed, catch fish, and you live.
Wow. Would you hunt first, or would you trap first?
I fish first. You always fish first. Fish first is the easiest thing because typically you can see the fish, and they're in one spot. Whether it's like a moving river, they typically kind of stay in the rapids.
You're just hand fishing?
You can hand fish. You can start building traps. The reason why I say fish first is because at a certain point it's active, but you want to eventually get to passive. Active meaning I might have to throw a line in the water, watch that line with the bait, and try and catch that fish. Eventually, I want to be able to see those fish, build a fish weir, a fish basket, a fish trap, where those fish are going to naturally migrate in there. And then while that trap is working for me, I'm out actively hunting. So that's passive work.
Wow.
And now I'm going to go out, build a bow, and actively hunt, or build a rabbit stick or stone sling.
Wow. And the second you're into passive hunting, now you're thriving. It's
not yet.
You get close though.
You're getting close.
Now you can eat.
Yeah, the food acquisition is key. You get that food drive. But if you have a secure source of food, so let's say you have a couple fish traps in the passive mode, you have a couple snare traps where you're snaring up rabbits, that's passive mode, then you can be actively hunting something bigger, but more importantly, you could be doing something else like
finishing up your shelter.
Finishing your shelter, building some comfort in the form of a vet. So you have things working for you while you're doing something else.
Wow.
So if you're out in New York for 2 weeks, shelter number one.
Okay.
And then really based on that season, water is always important because you're going to go a couple days without water before you're really dehydrated, but fire is also in there as well. So it's always kind of a fire water sort of scenario. If I'm in the Chihuahua Desert and I know there's not a lot of water, the last thing I'm going to worry about is fire. But I might need fire to process my water to make it safe to drink. 10,000 years ago, it didn't matter. You could sip right from it. But in this kind of day and age,
if you're in Alaska, you're probably more focused on fire.
Yeah, if I'm in Alaska, fire's a great thing. Keep bears away, black flies, mosquitoes.
And water's all around you.
Water's everywhere. I've drinking plenty of bad water, plenty of good water. It's just kind of one of those things.
Wow.
But then once all that
so now I got my shelter. I burned down the thing. I've got my thing fixed up. I found a creek near me. And I got like a little fish situation going. I can probably drink the creek water.
Yeah, you could. You got to be careful.
Why?
There's a lot of waterborne pathogens, Giardia, Cryptosporidium, all these things that can ultimately, beaver fever, give you, the runs for a couple of days, which will ultimately
So how do I fix the water?
So you just take the water and you want to be able to boil it, or you have to, again, use your fire and maybe take another log or tree and burn out a bowl. So you burn a nice big recessed cavity in there. And then in your fire, you take some hot rocks and you start to heat up rocks in your fire. And you can take handfuls of water, you can take big leaves of water, you can wait for rain to fill that bowl up, but hopefully it's something that you can transport. And then you heat those rocks up, you take that dirty water, you take those hot rocks, put them in that water. As soon as they hit that water, they start to flash boil. It will kill everything in that water.
Oh, really?
And you got safe water to drink.
Oh, that's so clever. In my mind, I'm like, how do I put water over the fire?
You put the fire over the water.
Wow.
Into the water.
Okay, so now it's probably like day 5.
Day 5.
I got like my shelter built.
Yep.
I got clean water because I put my hot stones into the water.
Yep.
I caught some fish in my little trap situation.
Good. You eating them raw?
No, I probably would try to cook them or something.
All right. So you cook the fish up?
And I made a fire because one time I saw this video where this dude got like one of those little sticks and then he got the wire on the top and then he made like a little pump.
Pump drill, yeah.
So I know how to do that.
Okay.
That's pretty cool.
You're in there.
So you can make a pump drill. I would get like little kindling and like small little dry leaves and things like that.
Tinder kindling fuel.
Get like a piece of stone and just try to create as much friction as possible.
Yeah.
And I'd be hacking away as long as I can.
Yeah, that would get you.
So now I've got some smoke going. I got a fire.
You got a fire.
Dude, I'm having a great time. It's day 5.
It's day 5.
I'm eating fish. I'm cooking them over the fire. I'm just kind of eating the fish. It's kind of raw, probably, because what I would probably do is put them on a stick.
Yeah.
And I'd probably put them over the fire.
That'd be good.
And then I'd probably just get my fingers in there and just start eating.
Yeah. Skewer it up. Grab some natural greens, some wild garlic, mustard, purslane, things like that. Stuff it in the fish.
Is that real?
Yeah.
Wild mustard?
Yeah, mustard, garlic, purslane. There's more things to eat in a weed bed than there is like in most places. Like eating the weeds is the most important thing. Most of the weeds that people kill with some sort of chemical are typically medicinal or edible. Like my girlfriend is a master at medicinal plants. She knows plants. Our house is drying herbs and like she has a cabinet of all these herbs and like you could have any ailment and she'll be able to whip something up and you can down it. She makes salves. She'll collect creosote from the deserts to make me beard balms. And
wow. Yeah. I think you had told the story, but you like drank some water from the Amazon.
Yeah.
You got the beaver fever or something?
Yeah. So I was in the Amazon. I was racing this guy across the Amazon jungle. It was just him and I. We had to like build boats and paddle and swam across the Amazon. I shot an electric eel with a bow and it was, you needed food. But then after a while, I was just like, I'm just going to drink the water. If it's clear and moving, that's not a good practice. But I was like, I need some water. So I drank some of the water. Then eventually some sort of parasite sort of thing was living inside me. And on my flight back from South America.
Did you win?
I did.
Fuck yeah.
I did. It was a good race. But yeah, I essentially texted her and was like, hey, you got to do one of your things. Something's growing inside of me. It feels like aliens and, I'm just pooing nonstop. So she's like, I got you. And I got home and she had a couple teas and within probably,
she made you a potion that basically cured your parasite.
She made me a potion.
Yeah, she's awesome.
She is. She's pretty
sick.
Awesome.
Yeah, but back to me, all right?
Yeah.
This is 6 days I've now been out in the wilderness.
Okay.
What do I got to do next? Like I have a shelter. I'm catching fish. I'm cooking them over
You got fire?
Over the fire.
Yeah.
Eating it with my hands.
Yeah. What do you want to do?
I mean, at that point,
it's whatever you want.
I could just do that for another week.
Yeah. Once your basic needs are met, fire, food, water, shelter, safety, at that point, you're kind of in that thrival zone. And if your duration of time is only 2 weeks, you'd be like, all right, well, I'm only out here for one more week. What do I want to do? Maybe you want to, craft a bow or craft some sort of primitive hunting tool. Maybe you want to search for some wild, inks and pigments to maybe do some cave art or some paintings or something. Maybe you start crafting things that would build up into your level of comfort. Maybe the ground you're sleeping on, you want to layer it with some pine boughs and maybe some grasses and just kind of get a comfort.
Now it's nice.
Build an elevated bed, build a simple maybe smoker. Maybe you're catching so many fish, you want to preserve fish and you have smoked fresh fish,
Wow.
You can smoke anything over a hot fire. You're not cooking it. Like smoke is a toxic environment. Things don't like to live in smoke. So when you're smoking fish, you're creating an aspect of heat that's going to draw out the moisture, and then the smoke is going to permeate that meat and give it a little bit of taste, but then also that smoke is hot, and that's going to act just like a dehydrator. I mean, I've smoked hog, elk, venison, tons and tons of fish, and you just keep it for a rainy day. Like what happens if one day it's completely raining out and you're stuck inside your shelter? Maybe you take
that sucks. I can't eat that day.
You can't eat that day.
Because I can't make a fire.
But if you got smoked fish, is your fire inside? Is your fire outside your shelter?
I'd probably do it outside because I don't want smoke all up in my thing.
No. Case by case. If you build a teepee-like shelter with the fire pit right in the middle, you can smoke your fish in the upper recesses of your teepee. The smoke will funnel out the top while you're laying on the side. Not only do you have a working fire inside that's generating heat, you have food preservation, you have entertainment because the fire is the ultimate TV. There's always a good channel on. You just sit there, watch your fire, maybe create a song in your head, and then you create some sort of drum, you know. Anything's possible. That's when you're getting into that thriving zone where you have an abundance of food that comes pretty, you know, easily or stored in certain ways. That's when you can start getting into, you know, building clay pots, finding an animal carcass and scavenging the bones and turning them into maybe a flute or a fishing lure or a spearhead. Maybe you find some napping stone and you start to take all of the hard work that you did prior to and start to kind of redirect it. Those new calories that are coming and say, what do I want to do today? Maybe I'm going to hike down the valley a little bit and see what else is over there. Maybe you find some berries. It's all about exploring, if you will. But it's not hard to get to that state of fire, shelter, water. The food is always the factor.
Yeah.
You'd be surprised how hard it is to get food when you have absolutely nothing of modern means to get your food. Meaning, like, it is hard to hunt an animal. It is hard to catch fish when you don't have some of those modern sort of things. You can build a lot of primitive things and they will work. But it's like, if I'm setting out a snare trap, I'm not going to set out one snare trap. I'm going to set out 10, 12, 13 snare traps. I got to increase my odds. But how much energy does it take for me to build one snare trap? Am I making the cordage? What exactly am I doing to produce that snare?
Yeah. Wow.
You do find there's not a lot of options. So you might only have, like, you know, in the desert, you might have 3 things that you can eat. That's it. So you're not like going to spend a lot of time being like, well, let me walk over that mountain. Maybe there's this over here. It's like, what is.
Wow.
And in the snow is awesome because you have the ultimate shelter builder, which is the snow. You build what's called a quinzhee or like an igloo. So you take all the snow and you pile it up, and snow in its fluffy form is very like lightweight. But as soon as snow is touched or impacted by anything, those snow flakes will lock like Legos. So as soon as you pile it up in a big mound, you essentially dig out a hole and you take sticks that are about 8 inches in length and stick them all around the outside. You go inside and you dig until you come to the other side of that stick and you build this huge snow cave and you just sleep in a snow cave. You ever, like in a cul-de-sac now, they used to plow those big mounds of snow? It's the same exact thing. You're just digging out a huge tunnel.
Wow.
A huge cavern. You can light a candle in there, increase your body heat, build elevated beds.
You would sleep in there?
Yeah, man, I've slept in those things countless times.
Dude, okay.
Everything.
I'm so happy right now. Okay, so thank you for helping me survive in the forest.
No
Okay,
problem.
I spent 2 weeks upstate New York, and I've made it out because of you. Thank you, Donald. Appreciate that. Is your real name Donald?
Donald Dust is my birth name, but
That's an insane name. There's no way that that's your real name.
It is.
Donald Dust.
Well,
That's crazy.
we name all of our firstborns Donald. So, like, my dad is Donald William Dust. I'm Donald George Dust. My son is Donald William Dust the third, but we just call him Will. And my dad's dad was Donald William Dust. There's Donald Paul.
So
there's lots.
Everyone's Donnie Dust.
Everyone's a Donnie Dust.
That is so sick.
My youngest son is Alden Dust because he's the last ones because I'm all done having kids. that's like his legitimate name.
Alden.
Alden, yeah, Alden.
Well, thank you for helping me survive in the forest.
No problem, man.
If there was a terrain for you to be dropped in, what is the most difficult to survive? And tell me a story about it.
Let's think. The most difficult terrain to survive in would probably be like an Arctic environment.
Yeah.
I'm talking extremes, no trees, just snow.
Barely any animals.
The animals there, wolves, muskox, things like that will definitely have you. And I've spent some time in the Arctic. I've spent time a lot in Alaska, but up by like Yellowknife, Lutsk, that sort of area. It's just it's an extreme place, and the biggest factor is the temps. And then when temps hit, a lot of critters start to hibernate. So your food option is greatly reduced. You still have things that are out roaming around like moose and rabbits and hares and things like that. But the ability to forage berries, the ability to do simple things comes even more complicated just because of the extreme temps. I mean, some of my times up in like the Fairbanks region of Alaska where it's, negative 40 degrees, is just unbelievable as far as how cold it gets.
Yeah.
But it's still doable.
Alone? Alone seems tough.
Alone, and then alone for probably like, a week and some change, and then some small groups in teaching capacity.
So if you go alone and you survive a plane crash in Fairbanks, Alaska, and you're wearing just what you were wearing on the plane, how do you survive for a week?
For a week, number one, if that plane crash is still in its like kind of somewhat of a form, I'm going to try and use as much of that as I can as a shelter, because the temps out there, they're just extreme, negative 40, negative 50. So I'm building something just to stay warm there and safe inside. I'm not worried about food. You can go quite a number of days without food. It's really shelter and just staying warm, and then hoping somebody can kind of save me. If no one's coming, then I'm going to start to take apart that plane, fabricate clothing through sewing with the wires and the seat covers, the internals, whatever I can get my hands on to build what's called a microclimate. So we're inside the tent for camp, which is an awesome tent.
Thank you.
Now imagine if we were in this, and this is our plane hull, the body, the fuselage. I know that it's you and I, it's going to be very hard for you and I to heat this up with our body. So what we'd want to do is create a microclimate, a smaller environment that you and I can sustain in. So maybe it's taking this pole that's over here and all of these rugs and dropping them down. So we're creating a lower pitch in the roof, and maybe we're decreasing half of this, where this is the front half and this is the target area that we're looking to stay warm in, because our bodies will heat it up. More importantly, just through us being in there, it's going to start to feel a little bit more warm, a little bit more
So
cozy.
a shelter can be too big.
A shelter can be way too big. Like if you think about most of the shelters that I build when I'm traveling from point A to point B is typically a pile of grass and leaves right up against a log. The wind's blowing this way, the log's falling here. I'm sleeping right here. And the grass is just giving me comfort. I call it a Sasquatch sleeping bag, really. Huge mound of leaves, and then I just crawl inside those leaves and go to sleep.
One of the first times I ever went camping, just my wife and I got a tent, and I remember the tent being so much smaller than what I used to camp in with my family. And I was like, why is it so small? It says it's a 2-person tent, but this thing was just, like, you couldn't stand in it.
Yeah.
You could only crawl into it. I was like, this thing seems so small. And then I was doing some research on it. They were like, no, you don't want this huge tent, because if you're out someplace cold, like it was like weather rated, and they're like, if you're out someplace cold, you can't heat it up. And it never dawned on me. I was like, oh wow, it makes a lot of sense.
Most of like the extravagant shelters that I will build, I kind of call like mountain teepees, where so at 6'2", I will typically take a knee, like a high knee, and that is the height that I will build my shelter, simply being that if I get hemmed up inside that shelter where there's some inclement weather, I do want to be able to kind of like stand and stretch my back and be able to kind of move around, but it's not so big where I'm just creating this huge column of open space that I'm going to have to try and heat. Also, about 4.5 feet, if I start hanging materials up in the kind of the rafters where the smoke would pull, that's also a good smoking platform. It's good for storage, a lot of different things. So once you've built, like, you and your wife should go camping. Here's the deal. I'll set you up with the gear list. You bring like these 10, 15 items, and you guys go out with those 10, 15 items, and you do 3 days. And out of those 15 items, you get to employ 5 the first day, and then the next 5 the second day, and the last 5 the third day. And out of those 3 days, those little switch of 5 items, you get to say, what did I absolutely need? What was just a, I could have went without sort of thing. And then as you start to go deeper into the woods and go on longer trips, you'll quickly realize, like, I don't need this. I don't need this. I just need these 3 things. Like for me, I have 4 things: a blade, a blanket, a bottle, and a burn, an aspect of fire. Those are the 4 hardest things to really replicate out in the bush. And when I operate in these 3 praxis, a low tech, a no tech, and then a high tech, those are kind of the 3 zones. So in a high tech world, you can go out with tents, sleeping bags, and stoves. Low tech maybe is canvas, flint and steel, and maybe a steel knife and an axe. No tech is animal hides and stone tools. So if you operate in those kind of 3 zones, you can kind of say, I was on a camping experience and I was in this kind of high tech world. It was summertime. I brought a tent. It weighed me down. Next time I go, I'm going to kind of just drop to maybe a tarp. In the event that it rains, I can throw it up over me, but I'm just going to sleep under the stars and watch the world kind of move by, So you kind of get to pick and choose the different things that you want to kind of, participate in when it comes to camping or survival. Like if I go camping with my 2 boys, we go camping. I'm like, well, look, what Dad does is different. Like we're going out, we're going to bring the kayak, we're going to bring some fishing poles. We're probably going to do a hand drill because that's, that's what we do. But we're going to go out.
You're there to have fun with your kids.
Yeah, we're going to go out and have fun. When Donny goes out with Finn, we're going to go a certain way. When I go with Marissa, my girlfriend, her one thing is she just doesn't like to be cold. And I'm like, that's not a problem. But
so reasonable.
So reasonable. But she's like, I don't need a lot of food. She doesn't need a lot of water. I mean, she's 103 pounds soaking wet, so it's real easy to feed her. I'm like, here's a quarter of a granola bar. She's like, oh my God, I'm full. So it's very easy based on who you go with to kind of prepare yourself. For me, it's like when I'm solo or with my dog. When I'm with my dog, I actually bring more comforts for him. I make sure he has like a caribou hide, some good jerky, because I don't ever want my suffering to be like overlaid on him. Right. But you kind of get to pick those zones, and that ultimately builds into your experiences. And then once you're kind of in one zone, you kind of say, all right, you know what? Instead of tents, instead of a sleeping bag, let's bring a tarp and let's bring a wool blanket and wrap yourself up in a wool blanket. And then what you start to get is that ground truth, saying, it was cold last night, but it wasn't as cold when I was 15 camping with my dad. That's not a big deal. We did totally fine. Maybe don't bring any food. Go without food. That's always an amazing experience. You'll quickly learn that you really don't need it if you're going out for a couple days. Eventually, you're going to need some calories to stay calorie positive. But as long as the mind is occupied, like you'll never think about food. I know when I'm fasting, all I got to do is sit and flint nap, make 10 spear points, axe heads, do whatever I need to do for that day, and I will not think about food. As soon as I pick my head up, I'm done. I'm like, oh man, I'm hungry. Back to flint napping.
Wow.
Just occupy the mind.
It's a good lesson. Like if people are fasting or they're doing intermittent fasting, it's like, stay busy. Just
stay busy.
Keep moving. And then you'll be less hungry. It's bizarre. It seems counterintuitive. Like,
it does.
Well, the more stuff I do, the hungrier I'll be.
Yeah. It's mind occupation. Occupy the mind. Read a book. Do something that's somewhat physical, because you don't want to burn too many calories, especially in like a survival situation.
Right.
But
some type of repetitive motion, making flint, something like that.
Absolutely. Playing the guitar.
Oh, this is so cool. What's your longest that you've been solo surviving?
God. So there's been a couple 60-dayers, a couple 30-dayers, some 10-dayers. There's been a whole collective of numbers.
60 days?
60 days.
Where was that?
In Australia.
Where in Australia?
From Townsville, 31 days out, 31 days back.
Hiking, walking?
Just walking, just earth roaming.
Earth roaming?
Yeah.
Wow.
No plan, just go.
And what materials did you have for 60 days?
So I had a backpack, a steel water bottle. I had like a K-bar knife, which was like a military knife. And then I had like 2 or 3 MREs, but I wound up eating like wood grubs, caught some fish in these ponds and streams, and just kind of slept out under the stars. But I didn't really know where I was going. I just knew if I walked west, I would eventually have to walk east. And I came across like a couple towns and Vegemite. I picked up a tub of Vegemite. Sometimes like the solo stuff, is not about the time number of days. It's about what you're ultimately experiencing. I've had more success in a 3-day solo thing, solo adventure, solo earth roam, than I have in, a 20, 30, 40-day one. The reason being is it's like when you're out there, sometimes it's the experiences, the things you come across that are the biggest value. And like, that's where you're like, man, for those 3 days, I caught 20 fish.
Yeah.
I smoked those fish. I got fish coming home with me. Like it's that. So I built a shelter that was just 2 logs and a branch, and I was perfect.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I saw you know, a mom elk giving birth. Like, it's the experiences.
Yeah. Yeah. I need to ask. Do you see these like primitive YouTube guys that make like these like giant elaborate palaces?
Oh yeah, it's all fake.
Are all those are fake?
Yeah, a lot of those got exposed because there'd be like tractor,
like excavator,
excavator marks on the ground. There's a couple good channels out there that.
Do you know any that you can recommend offhand?
There is.
I've seen Primitive Technology.
Primitive Technology, the Australian guy.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's in kind of like that north.
Wears like his khaki shorts and doesn't say a word.
Yeah, he's got a lot of good stuff. He's got a great channel. It's him. He's got a great location. He has some of the most choice resources from the cane and the clay. It's really kind of that best case scenario with the stuff that's there. There's a guy named Will Lord who does some great flint napping. He's a UK guy. Let's think. I don't watch a lot of survival stuff.
Sure,
which is kind of
makes sense.
Funny. I'm really into I enjoy the artifact hunting, the ancient kind of ruins exploring. I mean, there's a whole plethora of channels. My one recommendation when people are watching YouTube videos, especially when it comes to survival and outdoor skills, is always be cognizant of where that person is. And with the idea that if a guy is demonstrating how to do a bow drill friction fire and he's in his garage, that is the best environment to do it. There's no wind. He's probably already got it set up.
Right, it's all dry.
It's all dry. So take certain portions of it and say, good factual information. But what is it like to do it in a natural environment? Yeah. That's kind of that one factor, because I see there's a lot of folks that if you just took that camera and spun it around, there's their truck with the cooler. So
shooting 3-pointers during practice is a little bit easier, but as soon as you get in the game, it's
exactly
you got some pressure.
Exactly. And I think the one thing with the stuff that I do on my YouTube, which is a lot of lithics and then a lot of in the bush with me and my dog. But the one thing that I tell most people is all the stuff I put online, whether it's on YouTube or TikTok or anything, that's about 15% of my life that I want to share.
I think less, dude. Yeah. I mean, even just this combo.
That's what I mean.
There's so much more that's going on with Donny.
I reserve that for, my boys, my girlfriend, my family, and people that I come across.
That's cool, man.
It's just a small little taste.
Okay, last question.
Yes, sir.
Last question before we go eat. We gotta get some steaks.
Let's get some steaks.
Just favorite travel story.
Favorite travel story.
Just being out, doing an adventure, going out, meeting someone, being in an experience that just changed your perspective on the world. The floor is yours.
Travel story. Okay, I think this travel story was kind of multiple people kind of coming across, but I landed in Reykjavik, Iceland, and I was going out there to shoot a TV episode, and it was right at the times of COVID, and the guy I was shooting it with, he had COVID, so I had 2 weeks on my own in Iceland, and the production was like, well, we can set you up in a hotel. I was like, no, do not set me up with anything. I'm out the door. So I landed in Reykjavik, and there's a Viking museum not far from the airport, so I'm a big walker. I walked to the Viking museum, and I hid all of my luggage right at the base of the museum in this sea rock wall, and I'm like, it'll be fine there. No one's going to find it. And then jumped on the road, stuck my thumb out, and just started hitchhiking and finding people that had good recommendations. So I was kind of going back to my old counter intel days of talking with the people because they're going to know. And hitchhiking out there is very popular. And before I knew it, I think it's called the Skorsgård waterfall, this ancient waterfall that you could see from the ocean, and then seafarers knew that they were in the right spot based off this waterfall. Camped out there for a night and went all around Iceland. And eventually I came to this one little town. I can't even remember the name of it. More importantly, I probably wouldn't be able to say it. And I walked in and I said, where do people go where nobody else wants to go? And this guy, he kind of was speaking something to me, and I had a map. And I'm like, where can I go where there's no people? And he pointed to this spot on the map, and I was like, perfect. So I hitchhiked to the base of this mountain, and I had no idea what was over there, but he said there was nobody there. So I take this like rocky, loose, scree field trail to the top of this mountain. And as soon as I get to this mountain, it is just this vast openness of Icelandic terrain. And what I see out way in the distance is this little plume of steam. And there's a geyser out there. There's a hot spring. So I'm like, let's just go. Now keep in mind, I'm in sandals and shorts, and I think I have a small little backpack, and I just start walking. And in my backpack, I have one large beer, because that's the easiest thing to buy there, and like 3 or 4 dried fish that I bought at a store. And I just started walking the whole way out there. And as I was getting closer and closer and closer, I eventually made it to this geyser, stripped down, butt naked. And to get into a geyser, you see where the geyser is, that's the hottest. So you start in the low spot. That's a little colder. You keep working your way up. And eventually I find the sweet spot. And I'm just hanging in this geyser, eating dried fish, drinking this beer, butt naked. There's steam pluming. There's no one around. Like you could see for miles. There's no one around. And I'm eating fish, and I'm like, this is happening. I've got my camera, and I'm like sending messages. Well, messages that I will eventually send. I'm like, you guys will never believe where I'm at. I'm like eating this fish head. And I spend my time out there. I walk around. I kind of find these different ravines and caverns and all this sort of stuff. And eventually I walk all the way back to this mountain. This is like 2 or 3 days. I walk back over, and as I'm coming down, there's this short little Icelandic man walking up. And I'm like, hello, how are you? He's like, oh, and he spoke English. And I was like, oh, right on. He goes, did you have a good time? And I'm like, I had a great time. He goes, well, what do you think of the place? And I'm like, this is absolutely amazing, man. I'm like, have you been on it? He goes, yeah, it's mine. And I'm like, wait, what? He goes, all of this is mine. And I'm like, the geyser, like all of this? He goes, yeah, it's all mine. And I was like, I didn't know it was yours. A guy told me that I could go out here. He goes, yeah, it's totally fine. That's kind of how we live here. What's mine is yours. Feel free to explore. You're welcome back at any time. And after talking to that guy for that short period, I was like, I wish the world had that mentality. More importantly, the people that were sharing it and the people that were actually using it would have the mentality of like, keep it better than you found it. That one old man wasn't like, get off my, like you find that so many different places, but this one old man was like, it's mine, but it's also yours. And I think that is the perfect example on how to share not only someone's land, but maybe the knowledge they have, the humor that they might possess, the skills that somebody could have. It should be about sharing. And I think that guy right there and that one experience was a perfect example on like this is all of ours. It's just not mine. It's just not theirs. It's all of ours. Treat it right, and we can share it forever.
Donny Dust, thank you so much, brother.
My pleasure, man.